Portal is a series that I believe needs no introduction. You could say the same about a lot of Valve's games, but it especially rings true in the case of Portal. You know it, you've more than likely played it. In fact, many people who barely know Valve and what their other series are all about have gone through these games. I think it's safe to say that Portal is easily one of the company's most recognizable IPs. I would definitely know because it was one of the earliest experiences I had with Steam games and Valve and whatnot, at least as far as I can remember. Team Fortress 2 is what got me into games on Steam, but it was Portal that really made me want to stay, and it's probably the reason I still use this service even now. It's definitely the series that cemented my interest in Valve's games. The story today begins all the way back in 2005 at the DigiPen Institute of Technology. A group of students going by the name Nuclear Monkey Software developed a game called Narbacular Drop for their senior project. The core idea of the game was simple but ingenious. You navigate a dungeon using a portal mechanic. There's two you can place, one color-coded orange and the other blue, and the player must place them in order to solve puzzles, which they can only do on certain surfaces. Starting to sound familiar? Yeah, this weird-looking senior project that barely even resembles the series this video is titled after, it's what Portal is actually based on. Valve was at the university's annual career fair that year, presumably looking for potential new employees, when Robin Walker saw Narbacular Drop. He was impressed and contacted its team with advice and an offer to demo the game at Valve's headquarters. After presenting, presumably to Gaben himself, they were offered jobs right on the spot to develop the game further, specifically on the Source engine. This game would, of course, eventually become the Portal we know. Initially, the newly hired team focused only on the gameplay elements, saving the story for later. Playtesters actually inspired them to include a narrative, since they always said they enjoyed the game but wondered if the puzzles were leading to something. The developers had used Half-Life assets very heavily in the early versions, specifically textures and props from Nova Prospect, giving the game this really kind of creepy look. But even though that changed to the more clean sci-fi look we know from the final game, they still decided to tie the game into Valve's pre-existing Half-Life universe, with the help of series writer Mark Laidlaw. This is where the idea of an AI that talks to the player came in, perfectly fitting into the scientific research facility setting, I might add. Also, cake. Cannot forget the cake. Anyway, Portal was completed in 2007 and was given the honors of releasing in the Orange Box. If you've been living under a rock for the past, however many years, the Orange Box is how you do a video game collection, or at least one of the best ways you can. It included not only Half-Life 2 and Episode 1, it had 3 then new releases: Half-Life 2 Episode 2, the magnum opus of the iconic Half-Life series, Team Fortress 2, the greatest multiplayer shooter of all time in my opinion at least, and of course Portal, the exciting new IP that got everyone talking. When the Orange Box came out, Portal was the surprise hit of the package. Of course, people also played the other games, both Episode 2 and TF2 were received very well, but it was Portal that seemed to really stand out for people. Its unique ideas for puzzles involving the titular mechanic, oppressive atmosphere, and entertaining story with witty dialogue made it stand out in many people's minds. That said, in a lot of ways, it transcended the video game industry. In fact, it received attention in the academic scene for its surprisingly realistic depiction of physics, as well as it generally encouraging a creative thinking approach for problem solving. The game would then go on to get a sequel, which ended up being just as, if not more beloved than the original. All around, it was a phenomenon. It may seem crazy that this little puzzle game inspired all that, but that's exactly what happened. Just this past October, the first Portal game, and by extension the series, celebrated its 15th anniversary. So, you know what? I'm going to talk about it. I mean, I already did that huge video documenting my journey through the Half-Life series as a newcomer to it, so it only seems logical to do the same for Portal. Except I'm not a newcomer to this series. Well, to be fair, I already did spoil that fact. I am no new guy when it comes to Portal, and next to TF2, these games are the Valve titles I'm the most familiar with. The first time I tried playing Portal must have been back in 2013 or 14. That's like a decade ago now. What the hell is... what's happening? Anyway, existential crisis aside, I specifically wanted to try and play Portal 2. So I did what any kid would do in that situation, try and find a way to play it for free. This quest failed though, and all I had to show for it was something called the 6 Cents Perpetual Pack that needed the game anyway. Around that Christmas, I was finally able to buy the Portal bundle, and the rest is history. I went through both games, and while I sucked at devising solutions to the puzzles, I was enamored with them. Their gameplay, story, presentation, music, setting, characters, all of it. Coming into this video though, it's been a little while since I played both of them. My last playthrough of Portal 2 was back in December 2018, and while Portal 1, I haven't even launched it since 2014. So while I remember the general gist of both, they weren't fresh on my mind like Half-Life was. Well, having played them again, I don't end up returning to them much, but let me tell you, when I do, I instantly remember why this is such a well-loved series. I think it's not only a masterpiece, but is damn near perfect in what it aims to do. I'll be talking about both games in this video because... I don't know, it just works out better in this case. So join me, because it's time for another dive into an iconic Valve series. To be honest, I don't really know where to begin. I have a decent amount to say about these games, and yet no idea how to say it. So why don't we just dive in from the beginning. Christ, it's almost been a decade since I first saw that intro, and yet it still gives me goosebumps. Same for the title screen we're presented with. It's a static shot of the research facility we'll be going through, complete with a foreboding, discordant music track that sends a haunting tone. Alright, sorry, I just needed to point that out. Let's just start the game already. In a simple yet iconic opening sequence, main character Chell wakes up in that sleep chamber from the title screen. After a few seconds of waiting, a robotic voice greets us and reveals what's going on.
Hello, and again, welcome to the Aperture Science Computer-Aided Enrichment Center. We hope your brief detention in the relaxation vault has been a pleasant one. Your specimen has been processed, and we are now ready to begin the test proper. Before we start, however, keep in mind that although fun and learning are the primary goals of all Enrichment Center activities, serious injuries may occur. For your own safety and the safety of others, please refrain from
Por favor, por donde
fallan. Muchas gracias. Turn back.
This is the Aperture Science Enrichment Center, and today we'll be participating in their testing program. What for? We don't know yet. We can only assume that it's either some sort of training or, as can be observed later on, quality assurance for some product in development. The robotic voice, called GLaDOS, and yes, I'm pronouncing it that way because it's like MS-DOS, disk operating system, seems completely automated and pre-programmed, running on a designated protocol. Make sure to keep an eye on that aspect though, it'll become important later. I am very subtle. By the way, I love the idea how the puzzles are framed as a scientific product test. That's really clever. As soon as the portal opens, the hall leads to a quick tutorial chamber teaching that weighted storage cubes must be placed under these big red buttons in order to open locked doors. Immediately after this, a short chamber puts this learned aspect to the test, having 3 rooms linked to the main one with a portal that runs on a cycle. This puzzle's really simple. You just grab the cube from this one room, place it on the button in another, and then walk out the door in the last one. This sort of puzzle design is very common in this game, and while this example is, like I said, really simple because it's right at the start of the first game in a then new IP, I'd still say it's an apt demonstration of something that Portal does very well. Like Half-Life 2 in particular, it's extremely good at easing the player into its mechanics, teaching them how everything works at a reasonable pace. Not too slow as to feel bloated with tutorials, but also not so fast that it's overwhelming for newcomers. The game's ideas for puzzle mechanics, which as you'll see I think are very well thought out, are introduced and played with for the exact right amount of time. On top of that, everything feels deliberately crafted, with each ideologically flowing from the last. Case in point, portals, the game's titular mechanic. As mentioned, the very first room teaches how they work, just a direct gateway between 2 points, no matter the distance between them. You've probably all seen science fiction and know how portals and wormholes work, but still. After this is that 3 portal room, teaching that there's only 2 portals, one orange and the other blue. Amazing color choices if you ask me. It's then after this where we're given the iconic main weapon, if you can call it a weapon, of this series, the Aperture Science handheld portal device, or simply the portal gun, so I don't go insane writing this. We just have to wait for it to line up and automatically shoot a portal, after which it's right there for you to grab. This is when the game really opens up, as you no longer have to wait for portals to open for you automatically. Well, at least not the blue portal, since that's the only one you're able to place at first. Several chambers then follow, which focus on portal placement, involving putting cubes on buttons, energy balls, and moving platforms. Everything in the game is now designed with you having the ability to place that portal, and like with every other thing in the game, it starts simple and gradually introduces more elements that increase the test chamber's complexity. Eventually, you're then given the dual portal gun, which of course lets you place both color portals. With this one, the chambers become way trickier, as by this point the training wheels are off. Pretty much all the major mechanics have been introduced, and so the game just plays around with them and combines them in interesting ways that makes you think. When done well, puzzle games are one of my favorite genres for sure, and I'm willing to bet that it's Portal which sparked this. I wouldn't say the original game is so much responsible, but it's certainly a factor. Really, if I'm honest, coming back to this first game, I had forgotten precisely how tightly designed it was overall. As I reflect about the game critically to myself, I realized more and more that in terms of everything it aims to do and what it accomplishes, I think it's basically perfect. Portal was pretty short, running only a little over an hour if you know what you're doing, but it manages to pack that hour with consistently good content. This especially becomes true once the aforementioned figurative training wheels are gone, and the game is able to create really inventive puzzles by, like I said, combining the mechanics it taught very creatively. A few chambers in particular would come to mind for me immediately if I were to be asked to pick favorites. Chamber 14 takes place in a large corridor-like room. Some stairs appear that allow you to walk onto a higher platform on which there's a cube you'll have to grab. Since the stairs move back into the ground, leaving a portal surface below, the solution for this part becomes instantly obvious if you've been paying attention. And there you go, one of Portal's most famous mechanics, momentum conservation through portals. As GLaDOS says right here,
Momentum, a function of mass and velocity, is conserved between portals. In layman's terms, speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out.
Man, physics jokes are funny now, aren't they? This mechanic is used fairly frequently throughout this series, albeit a little less in the first game. It's always cool when you get to use it. Anyway, once you have the cube, there's a locked door you have to open with it, and behind that is a room with an energy ball. Back on the raised platform, there was a receptacle, and using portals, the ball can be sent into it, providing access to the lift to the next chamber. It's a simple puzzle, but it effectively uses these mechanics that have been taught up until now. Chamber 18, though, is probably the best one. It's the last true test in the game, so that makes sense in a way. It's this huge puzzle that involves turrets, energy balls, timing puzzles, platforms, and momentum jumps. It opens with a navigation challenge involving momentum jumps, leading into this large open chamber with turrets on raised platforms. The first step is, obviously, to take these turrets out with energy balls, after which you have to time pressing a button to allow one of them to the blocked receptacle. A cube is waiting on the other side of the room, which can only be reached with a momentum jump. The way this is done is genius. There's a button on a reachable ledge, which opens the wall panel on the other side of the room. You'll then have to portal back over to it, quickly walk over to this drop, lay a portal down, and jump through, allowing you to reach the cube and open the door on the other room. Afterwards, there's a momentum challenge that's actually pretty tough, probably the hardest moment in the game overall, and possibly the entire series, to cap off the chamber. All in all, a great combination of ideas that puts all the skills you've learned throughout the game to a proper test. Hey, it's great stuff. I could probably dissect every other chamber in the game with similar detail, but I'd rather this video not be 10 hours long, so let's not do that. At least for Portal 1, you just wait till I get to Portal 2. Suffice to say, Portal embraces its nature as a puzzle game very well and gets fairly inventive with its brilliant mechanics. I wouldn't say it's the most mind-blowing gaming experience in the world, especially since it's not 2007 anymore, but I would call it a solid experience that's confident in its ideas. That said, for as near-perfect Portal appears, it does have one thing that has less to do with it specifically, and is more so a bit of trouble with the puzzle genre as a whole. Unless the game gets reshuffled every time and its puzzles layouts change, it doesn't hold much replay value. Half-Life, for example, doesn't have this. While yes, its levels and maps are also the exact same every time you play, there's so many different ways those things can play out because of the unpredictable enemy AI. Same thing applies for lots of other games too, for instance, Mario. Same levels every time, but different ways to accomplish things. Puzzle games like Portal, on the other hand, have relatively little room for variability. Their puzzles naturally have one set solution. Well, you could get creative, but still, you have to go in one particular place. So once you know exactly how to solve each one, the game becomes extremely easy and short. Some chambers do have multiple ways to solve them. For instance, I managed to solve this room in Chamber 15 by brute forcing it with a camera from the wall. Definitely unintended, but a possible solution. Still though, at the end of the day, you're still solving the same puzzles in essentially the same way. Unfortunately, this is just kind of the nature of deterministic puzzle games like this. Once you know your way through them, they effectively lose their challenge since most of it is based on figuring out the puzzles in the first place. That is, unless you're speedrunning, but not everyone has the interest or drive to do that. As I said, the only real way to solve this would be to shuffle the game around on every playthrough, which is not the experience Portal was going for. And you know what? That's okay. Honestly, Portal is so tightly designed that you can appreciate it for what it is, irrespective of its relative lack of replay value outside of speedrunning. So yeah, the game is short. Once you have its number, you can probably run through it in less than an hour if you're quick enough, even without any speedrun strats of any sort. However, all of its ideas are so well taught, implemented, and utilized that it's hard for me to not recognize its strengths in spite of that. Portal is genuinely near flawless in its execution of a simple yet effective concept in my opinion, despite being a game I don't come back to very often. I think that in itself is worth acknowledging. But gameplay is not the only thing Portal is known for. No. It has more aspects that expand it from a mere puzzle game into something greater. If I could describe this game in a singular word, it would have to be atmospheric. I mentioned this a bit ago, but Portal is remembered for its atmosphere just as much as its gameplay elements. Its visuals, music, and ambience all come together to create a deep feeling of emptiness, loneliness, and just general isolation. All main test chambers have a really plasticky look to them with their plain white walls, making the Aperture facility feel modern or even futuristic. When you look a bit closer though, it becomes clear that something's off. For one, there's no people anywhere. You'll see these observation decks, which you'd presume would contain scientists observing the tests and documenting the results. However, nobody's there. You're completely alone in this place. Maybe everyone is just taking an extended lunch break, but then you look at the seemingly clean walls closer, and they're beginning to accumulate dirt and grime, almost like the people have been gone for a while. A bit suspicious to say the least. And not to be cliche, but that relatively clean and intact looking facility with nobody there gives that feeling of that whole liminal space thing that is just really just been big on the internet for a while now. I mean, that's kind of just a Source Engine thing. It's people have brought that up more than once, so I know I'm not saying anything groundbreaking or revolutionary by bringing this up, But screw you, this is my video, I do what I want. Anyway, alongside these aspects, you can occasionally come across these weird secret rooms hidden behind open wall panels. These all contain a bunch of trash thrown about and writing on the walls that hints something is up. It's clear that there's at least someone still here, and for whatever reason, they're trying to hide from something and leave warnings for test subjects, thereby adding an element of mystery to it all. Who's leaving this odd writing? Why are they so intent on hiding and warning others? What exactly is going on here in Aperture? I could smell some fuckery afoot. Portal's music and ambient sound design further sell this isolating mood. I mean, for one, it shares a lot of its ambience with Ravenholm from Half-Life 2. Kinda hard not to give off those feelings knowing that. Regardless, it's very effective even if not originally made for this game in particular. Throughout these chambers, you can feel how lonely it is, and I mean in a last man on earth kind of way. The music is also really atmospheric and just plain good. Especially tracks like Subject Name Here or Android Hell, which I'd say are my favorites in the game. But pretty much every track enhances the atmosphere in the moment, even if I end up forgetting exactly how some of them go. The Half-Life series certainly had more memorable compositions, but for what it's trying to do, Portal's soundtrack succeeds and is a great fit for the tone the game is going for, which is what makes GLaDOS' personality so funny. While Portal is quite atmospheric and even a bit grungy in some ways, the robotic voice that's overseeing you creates a tone of dark comedy that would go on to define this series. Even though she seems automated, she has the tendency to subtly insult you as you're going through each chamber, revealing a sort of disdain she, or rather, the company seems to hold towards its test subjects.
Perfect. Please move quickly to the chamber lock, as the effects of prolonged exposure to the button are not part of this test. Unbelievable. You
Subject name here.
must be the pride of.
Subject hometown here.
Please note that we have added a consequence for failure. Any contact with the chamber floor will result in an unsatisfactory mark on your official testing record, followed by death. Good luck. This next test could take a very, very long time. If you become lightheaded from thirst, feel free to pass out. All subjects intending to handle high-energy gamma-leaking portal technology must be informed that they may be informed of applicable regulatory compliance issues. No further compliance information is required or will be provided, and you are an excellent test subject.
It's not, break your lungs from laughing level hilarious, but entertaining. I couldn't imagine these games without this unique personality and tone and brand of humor, managing to perfectly blend oppressive atmosphere with ridiculous humor so well. It all comes together in the end, too, with an intriguing finale sequence. Once you're in Chamber 19, the final test, GLaDOS reveals to you that the cake you've been promised is right around the corner. This chamber has moving platforms above instant death water and even sees you avoiding an energy ball that can't explode, which is color-coded green. Really, it's just the Shrek ball. Once you're at the end of the line, a sign points directly to the cake, but as you all know, things like this usually don't go according to plan.
The test is now over. All Aperture technologies remain safely operational up to 4,000 degrees Kelvin.
Oh, God damn it. GLaDOS was a self-aware artificial intelligence all along and was playing you like a fiddle. All those moments of her making jokes at your expense, all the missing employees, those creepy messages you could find scrawled on the walls in hidden rooms, all were warning signs for this exact moment. GLaDOS didn't have any cake for you. She wanted to kill you all along, but since you got through the testing track, she's about to throw you into an incinerator anyways. Well, it's too bad she left portal surfaces nearby.
What are you doing? Stop it.
This next section of the game kind of drops the pretense of it being puzzles, and more so focuses on finding the way forward through Aperture's maintenance areas. I really like what they do with the visuals here, with all the abandoned infrastructure and whatnot. At one point, one of the test chambers shows up and you enter through the cube chute, and you can see a lot of the test chambers from the observation areas, which you actually enter. This area has frequent jumping across these large pistons, navigating areas above acid, and of course, turrets. A lot of turrets, actually. Also, they even introduce a new type of turret near the end that shoots rockets. You'll have to aim it, though, and that means jumping out of the way of its attack when it locks on. In typical Portal fashion, there's a short section that teaches the mechanic, as well as the fact that rockets can be shot through portals. Shortly afterward, there's then a test for what the game has taught, which brings me to what this entire maintenance section was building up to. Obviously, it's what else but a fight with GLaDOS. I mean, how else was the game gonna end? Chell enters the central AI chamber and finally lays eyes on her, a big mess of wires and steel hanging from the ceiling, as she greets us.
Well, you found me. Congratulations. Was it worth it? Because despite your violent behavior, the only thing you've managed to break so far is my heart.
Oh no, that's too bad. We broke her heart, guys. Now let's kick her ass. Now, GLaDOS' design is pretty interesting because it seems to resemble something. Some say she looks like Aphrodite rising from the sea, while others, yeah, I think the image I'm showing you on screen gives you an idea. Now that that wonderful image is in your head, it gives GLaDOS a disturbing edge, like she's hiding a secret. GLaDOS seems to have a malfunction, as this weird metal ball falls off of her. She appears surprised and confused as Chell incinerates the sphere. Well, that turned out to be a mistake. That sphere was GLaDOS' morality core. It was installed onto her by Aperture technicians after she tried to kill them repeatedly, but even when on her, GLaDOS still flooded the enrichment center with neurotoxins. A canon comic explores this a bit further. GLaDOS actually managed to trick the employees into giving her cats, boxes for them, and neurotoxin in an experiment involving a bring your cat to work day. It seems to be a test related to Schrodinger's cat, but little did they know it was all a euphemism. The box referred to the Aperture facility itself, and the cats were its employees. So technically, GLaDOS didn't actually lie, she just outsmarted the scientists. She then subjected any survivors to the same testing track we went through, and soon moved on to the list of contained subjects when she ran out of employees. One man, named Doug Ratman, managed to evade GLaDOS' capture and put Chell on the top of the subject list because of her stubborn nature and refusal to give up on anything. He then wandered into the facility, leaving messages for her as guidance, those of course being the creepy secret rooms we came across during the game. So, clear as day now, GLaDOS has always been an evil HAL 9000 type AI, so let's finish her off. This final boss isn't a direct traditional fight, because that would be weird, and instead has a simple puzzle behind it. A rocket turret emerges from the center, and as the game taught you, you'll have to send its rockets into GLaDOS using portals. That causes another core to fall off of her. Like with the first one, you'll then have to toss it into the incinerator across the room by portaling over to it, as it's only open for a few seconds after pressing the button to open it. Each core lands in an increasingly more difficult spot to reach, the last of which requiring portal momentum as it ends up in a spot only reachable with it. As the fight goes on, GLaDOS of course insults Chell, except much less subtly now. Some of these insults get really creative and still make me laugh.
I have your brain scanned and permanently backed up in case something terrible happens to you. Which it's just about to. Don't believe me? Here, I'll put you on. That's you. That's how dumb you sound.
Along with that, there is a genuinely interesting bit of lore that she drops.
Are you trying to escape? Things have changed since the last time you left the building. What's going on out there will make you wish you were back in here. I have an infinite capacity for knowledge, and even I'm not sure what's going on outside. All I know is I'm the only thing standing between us and them.
I mentioned before that Portal takes place in the same universe as Half-Life, and that becomes clear with several Easter eggs. Black Mesa is directly name-dropped in the Dollars and Cents slideshow, and their logo also shows up on the monitors in GLaDOS' chamber. Aperture was a direct business rival to Black Mesa, and the two fiercely competed for government funding, specifically contracts from the Department of Defense. Based on the state of the two facilities, Black Mesa clearly won out. Also, and this one isn't canon, but I still want to mention it, if you enable cheats in the dev console and type in Impulse 101, you get all the Half-Life 2 weapons to mess around with, along with portals. I think you can tell why this is fun. Alright, I got off track. That quote I showed a minute ago about how things have changed on the outside, if you're familiar with Half-Life, it should be pretty clear what she's referring to. Things changing outside is a reference to all that series of events, like the Resonance Cascade and the Zen invasion during the Black Mesa incident, and more to the point, its consequences. You know, the portal storms and worldwide Zenian attacks, Combine invasion, 7-hour war. It's not entirely clear at what point in the timeline Portal takes place relative to those events, but GLaDOS saying that Chell would wish she was back inside and how she says she's the only one standing between us and them, indicates to me that the 7-hour war is currently going on, or at least it recently occurred. It's never been confirmed how much time passes between the Black Mesa incident and the 7-hour war, but I'd imagine it was only a few months at most. Some would say Half-Life 1 occurs in May 2003, but I've personally been convinced otherwise by this video here analyzing all sorts of evidence, all of which suggests the game takes place around December of 2000. If that's true, then Portal is likely set sometime in spring or summer 2001. Aperture is located in Upper Michigan, and when we get a view of the outside, the trees are green and there's no snow anywhere. The 7-hour war should occur in very early January 2001 if this timeline is correct, which would place Portal around half a year after the Combine took over. Now you may be asking why I spent all that time talking about this. Simple answer, I love this shit. Half-Life and Portal lore is some of the most interesting in the entire gaming industry and the world in general, and I take every opportunity I can to speculate on it because it's simply fascinating. So please, can I just have this, please? Incinerating all of GLaDOS' cores causes her to absolutely break down, as her speech distorts and speeds up in an off-putting but funny manner.
Sarcasm, seer cell test complete.
Stop squirming and die like an adult or I'm going to delete your backup. Stop! Okay, enough. I deleted it. No matter what happens next, you're dead. Mr. Shuffler reminders us that you're dead. Your body did a picture and indefinitely on. I suspect you from the permanent record. Your entire life.
It's been a mathematical
A large portal seemingly opens and both GLaDOS and Chell are sucked into it. That's when you catch a glimpse of the midsummer Michigan forest that Aperture is in the middle of. Or mid-spring. I mean, it could be spring. Oddly enough though, no Combine forces to be seen. Apparently they had tried to get into Aperture to see if they could find any useful technology, but noped out of that one when they presumably encountered GLaDOS' powerful security system. They probably just deemed the facility more trouble than it's worth and permanently abandoned it. As Half-Life 2 reveals, they were looking for local teleportation technology for greater control over humanity. So the fact they couldn't get into Aperture means the Resistance dodged a bullet. Aperture actually did have technology that could give the Combine what they wanted with the portal gun. Also, need I even mention the Borealis? That came from Aperture, and the Combine were aggressively trying to find it. So if they got their hands on portal guns, humanity would have absolutely no chance at Resistance. I mean, minus the fact that they actually would have to manually shoot the portals, but they could probably adapt the technology in some way. But I'm digressing into lore talk again. In the original release of Portal, the game ended on this shot, but an update changed it to include a moment of being dragged back into the facility. A clear sign of things to come. And that's Portal. While short, it's absolutely sweet. In fact, I'd say for what it wants to do relative to what it accomplishes, it's nearly perfect. A brief yet self-contained and intriguing puzzle game with an entertaining story that fits into the Half-Life universe, creating some fascinating lore implications for both series. I love GLaDOS' one-sided insults, both the subtle and overt, and the puzzle solving introduces and tutorializes its mechanics at a perfect pace while also having some real fun to it. My only real criticism is, again, the dilemma I brought up with deterministic puzzle games. Once you know how to solve these puzzles, there's really no more challenge to them outside of speedrunning because they don't change between playthroughs. Unfortunately, it means Portal doesn't have the same replay value as many other games, from a casual perspective at least. And as someone who values replayability, that's a shame because it really is great. All it really means is that it's best played every couple of years instead of more frequently, so that you forget enough of the chambers to make them feel fresh again. Puzzle games like this aren't meant to be played repeatedly in the first place though, so it's fine. That said, while Portal is great on its own for what it is, it also set the stage for something that, at least for me, is even greater. Around 2010, Portal got an update that I mentioned that changed the ending, adding the part where you get dragged away while outside. Alongside that, it added way more radios in the game, which can be found in all sorts of locations. Players would have to take them to specific spots to see what they were really all about. When you're in just the right spot, they begin to output encoded messages. Some are Morse code, while most were SSTV, or slow scan television, signals. When decoded, these SSTV signals produce images with a puzzle in them, along with decoding using MD5 hashing and this old program called BBS and stuff like that. It's through solving these puzzles that teaser information for Portal 2 could be found. Being into this sort of thing, I find it fascinating that Valve chose to initially tease the game in this fashion. For one, it's fitting given the series' nature as a puzzle game, but also neat in itself because of the technology behind it. All around, it was such a fun community-oriented way to market a game. I wasn't around to witness it at all, but I can imagine how cool it must have been to see unfold. Also, I'm sure it would have been plain exciting because, well, in doing this, Valve revealed that there was indeed a sequel to Portal on its way. I mean, they had already announced it, but now we got a sneak peek look at it. Portal 2 has a surprisingly fascinating development history, beginning almost immediately after the release of the original. It was originally planned to make the bold choice of excluding the portal mechanic altogether and doing something totally different. Sounds odd considering it would still be a part of the same series, but that's how things were. Instead, the game would center around a new mechanic called f-stop. Players would use cameras to take photos of objects and store it in the camera, being able to rotate and scale set objects. Think of something like Superliminal. That's apparently how it would have played out. It would be set in the 1980s and feature none of the established established characters, acting as a prequel that told the story of how Aperture reached the point it did in the first game. Playtesters liked the new mechanic, but given how it takes place in the same facility as the first Portal, they were understandably disappointed in the absence of the titular mechanic. Instead of throwing the middle finger to the criticism though, Valve considered this feedback, and Gabe Newell strongly suggested the development team reconsider their direction in 2008. Now focusing on the Portal mechanic yet again, Portal 2 had a unique challenge. Valve wanted it to be a game where you would have to think your way through each chamber, feeling really smart when you solve it. That said, they would have to consider newcomers, properly teaching them the mechanics, while still making it complex enough to engage experienced players who already knew the first game from back to front. In the end, Portal 2 would release in early 2011 to universal acclaim once again. In fact, I've heard it said that if Portal 1 was a testbed, then Portal 2 was a game, or something to that effect. I'm not sure where I heard that quote, but I did somewhere. It won numerous awards and became well loved the whole world over. On top of that, it even made an impact in the real world, not just the gaming industry. I mentioned it way earlier, but it actually saw use in the world of academia. Math, physics, and really generally just science teachers as a whole ended up using the game for lessons or otherwise including it in the classrooms in some way. I don't think this is particularly necessary to say because most would probably agree, but that is badass. All the schools I went to were really standard and traditional in their teaching methods, with the only exception being a gaming class in my senior year of high school, but that was basically a study hall that occasionally asked for a writing exercise in the form of a review. Basically, a creative writing class that just had a gaming coat of paint. Still fun though. Anyway, I can only imagine how sick it would be to have been taught using Portal 2. I know they say you aren't supposed to be jealous, but I envy those who had the opportunity to be taught with it. It sure as hell would have appealed to me because, spoiler alert, I have even more history with, as well as fondness for, Portal 2 than its predecessor. I just remember being completely enamored as a kid, thinking about the story, visuals, and admittedly sucking at the puzzles, but still really enjoying them. It was definitely my favorite single-player Valve game. Admittedly, there wasn't much competition for that title since the only other one I had played was the original Portal. Would you look at that? But still, I come back to this game on occasion, but not as frequently as some others. My last time playing it was 4 years ago, at least 4 years before Winter Break 2022. And that should give you an idea of how long ago this footage was recorded and this script got written, I suppose. In any case, my point in this nonsensical ramble is that Portal 2 was one of my favorite PC games when I was younger, and stayed that way every time I would come back to it. As soon as I decided to cover the Portal games, I knew this is the one I really wanted to talk about. I still wanted to talk about the first one because it would give me an excuse to play it again, but the sequel is the one that truly inspired me to do this video in the first place. Before I begin, I want to make it clear that I'm only going to talk about the single-player campaign, so no co-op. It was a heavily advertised feature for the game, but like with Half-Life Decay, or the multiplayer mode from Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, or hell, countless other co-op experiences I could potentially talk about, I'm a lonely sack of shite and I have no one to play it with. With that said, enough of this dilly-dallying. I've got a masterpiece of a game to talk about right in front of me, and I'm more than pumped up to finally share my appreciation of it with the world. Also, hefty spoiler warning, because we'll be talking about this game in extreme detail. A little bit late for a spoiler warning, but better late than never. Immediately as the game begins, it becomes clear how much higher the budget likely was this time around, manifesting itself in the incredibly high production values. Since Portal was no longer a risk, but a proven success, Valve more than likely allocated more funds for the team to push the game's presentation to the next level. Not to say that the first Portal game had low production value or whatever, but when I look at it, it does pretty much feel like a Half-Life 2 mod, which it essentially was. I think it has to do with the general visuals, which give it that early Source Engine feeling. As someone who likes that atmosphere, I don't take issue with that whatsoever, but still, there was room to go even further. Portal 2, coming out several years after the original, feels both distinct from the typical look I associate with this engine, and way more detailed on the whole. I'll go more into detail a bit later, since I don't want to lay on the graphics talk so early though. Just know that it's a significant visual step up from the first game, as well as most Source Engine games in general. Portal 2 opens up in a stasis chamber, which looks like a typical cheap motel room. Shell was dragged back into the facility by a party escort bot, and placed in cryo-sleep in this room. However, the life support systems weren't active, which would cause her to die in suspension and never wake up again. Ratman, despite having escaped the facility, feels guilty in not repaying the favor to her, as she played a big part in helping him get out of the facility and even managed to relieve it from GLaDOS's control. So he goes back in and activates the systems for her, even if doing so is a severe risk to his life. He has no idea when she'll wake up, but at least she won't die. Oh yeah, by the way, did I forget to mention Ratman is schizophrenic and thus hallucinates a companion cube talking to him? I figured I'd mention that because his schizophrenia is what caused him to have nervous breakdowns right the way he did in those secret rooms. It's interesting too, because GLaDOS mentioned that the cubes can't speak at all in the first game. Anyway, Ratman enters his own cryo-sleep in a relaxation vault, thus laying the foundation for the events of Portal 2. The game begins when Chell is awoken for a mandatory wellness check by the facility's automated backup system, taking the form of a flat male voice. While this is a tutorial that teaches you how to look up and down, which some may see as hand-holdy, I don't personally have a problem with it because of how the scene actually plays out in terms of writing. Yet even as early as this short intro tutorial of sorts, the excellent writing of Portal 2 is on full display. It's plain funny and consistently makes me laugh every time I play it. Admittedly, the greater focus on humor in the game makes it less laid back overall, taking away a bit of the oppressive and lonely atmosphere of the first game, but I don't really care about that. Portal 2 has that trademark charm and dark comedy that Valve includes in several of their games. It comes out with the system considering looking up and down once some sort of exhausting physical activity. And need I even mention the painting?
This is art. You will hear a buzzer. When you hear the buzzer, stare at the art. You should now feel mentally reinvigorated. If you suspect staring at art has not provided the required intellectual sustenance, reflect briefly on this classical music.
Anyway, after that, Chell goes back to sleep, and the next time she wakes up, the amount of time she was in suspension is said to be just 9 repeating, but it's unclear if that means days or years or whatever. Some claims this means she was asleep for up to 50,000 years. What the f? Regardless, Portal 2's incredible writing continues to show itself, with the introduction of one of the best characters.
Ah! Ah! Oh, God. You look good. Looking good, actually. Are you okay? Are you... Don't answer that. I'm absolutely sure you're fine.
This is Wheatley, voiced by Stephen Merchant, one of my favorite Valve characters ever. He appears very similar in appearance to one of those cores from the first game, and was likely among the ones that awakened in the post-credits scene with the cake. Wheatley has the job of maintaining and checking on the test subjects in stasis, but with how much time has passed, he's basically just looking for one that's alive. Coming across Chell, he awakens her and gives her the rundown on the current situation.
Most test subjects do experience some cognitive deterioration after a few months in suspension. Now, you've been under for quite a lot longer, and it's not out of the question that you might have a very minor case of serious brain damage. But don't be alarmed, all right? Although if you do feel alarmed, try to hold on to that feeling, because that is the proper reaction to being told that you've got brain damage. Do you understand what I'm saying at all? Does any of this make any sense? Just tell me, just say yes. Okay, what you're doing there is jumping. You just jumped. But never mind. Say apple. Apple. Okay, you know what? That's close enough. Just hold tight.
Yeah, I think you can see what makes him so great. His lines are written well, and his scatterbrained delivery make him come off as hilariously disorganized. Essentially the perfect guy for the job of ensuring people don't become vegetables in stasis. Wheatley then tows our chamber over to the old testing track so we can try and find a way out, during which we catch a glimpse of just how amazing this game truly looks. It came out in 2011, and yet still holds up today. Maybe the footage isn't giving you the best impression because I had to record in 720p so that my hard drive doesn't get, crowded. But still, I truly find it difficult to believe that this runs in Source, that same engine created all the way back in 2004 for Half-Life 2. I personally say this is the best looking Source game, full stop. Right up there with Team Fortress 2. This game shows us the true scale of the Aperture facility. I've heard some say it comes off as a bit unbelievable in scale for them, but that doesn't really bother me personally. Every time I play this game, I'm taken aback by how amazing it looks, and the sheer scale of the complex always makes my imagination run wild. We get to see a lot of it, but there's no doubt that it has way more hiding just out of view. It makes me want to travel to the facility and just explore it, which to me is the mark of incredible world building in a game. Oh, and believe you me, things only get better in this regard as the game goes on, and you'd better believe I'll be calling attention to it every chance I get. But there is one thing about this intro that's a bit odd to me, and is the closest thing I have to a criticism of this game, along with one other odd aspect I'll mention when it comes up. It's hardly something that really gets on my nerves, but I'd still like to call attention to it. Strangely enough, it's the same nitpick I had with Half-Life 2. Whereas the first Portal game was fully focused on gameplay and had very few instances where you had to sit around and wait through cutscene-like scripted sequences, Portal 2 has multiple instances of this throughout. Like most other Valve games, it never takes control away from you and practically never leaves the first-person perspective, which I really appreciate as it makes the game more immersive. That being said, it also has a lot of more times where you'll be stuck in a room and will have to wait through a mildly lengthy bit of dialogue. Now, I love this game's story and writing, so like Half-Life 2, I hardly consider it much of an issue, and quite frankly, I find it to be a bit of a questionable complaint anyway, since the cutscenes really aren't all that long, but I can't deny that it unfortunately unfortunately has the effect of stunting the pace at times on repeat playthroughs, which could be a roadblock for some. Again, it doesn't bother me at all, just figured I'd mention it, because I understand the complaint despite not fully agreeing. Once Wheatley breaks through the testing track's wall, he tells Chell he'll see her up ahead and the two separate. Upon jumping into the testing track, we're met with a familiar location. Yeah, it's the same relaxation vault from the first game, with that glass room and time portal gate on the wall. Except things look way different. As a result of the time gap between the two games, Aperture has become completely run down and abandoned, allowing vast amounts of vegetation to creep in. An entire ecosystem has sprung up inside the facility, emphasizing just how long it's been since this place was last fully operational. The game begins in a somewhat bold way, as the same chambers we cleared from the original make a return. I suppose they really just were that well designed. Personally, I like this, especially because the overgrown visuals make them feel distinct and put a new spin on familiar ground. It's not just recycling old levels for the sake of it, there's a point to it. The ambience is also top-notch, really selling how far gone the facility is. There's also a few gameplay differences, such as how the second chamber allows you to control the portals with buttons instead of them running on a set cycle. You get the portal gun in a more interesting way too. After the floor of the chamber you originally got it in actually collapses, and you find it in the room below. Also, the writing here is downright incredible, with the automated voice talking about a literal apocalypse so casually and nonchalantly, among other things.
Because of the technical difficulties we are currently experiencing, your test environment is unsupervised. Before re-entering a relaxation vault at the conclusion of testing, please take a moment to write down the results of your test. An Aperture Science Reintegration Associate will revive you for an interview when society has been rebuilt. If the Earth is currently governed by a manner of animal king, sentient cloud, or other governing body that either refuses to or is incapable of
Listening to reason.
some emergency testing may require prolonged interaction with lethal military androids. Rest assured that all lethal military androids have been taught to read and provided with one copy of the laws of robotics to share. This next test applies the principles of momentum to movement through portals. If the laws of physics no longer apply in the future, God help you. Good work getting this far, future starter. That said, if you are simple-minded, old, or irradiated in such a way that the future should not start with you, please return to your primitive tribe and send back someone better qualified for testing. To ensure that sufficient power remains for core testing protocols, all safety devices have been disabled. The Enrichment Center respects your right to have questions or concerns about this policy.
Alongside the returning chambers, there's also several new ones, which too emphasize teaching players the mechanics in an effective, non-intrusive way. Speaking of which, in a gameplay sense, there's several ways to do a sequel, but there's two methods in particular that most employ. You could do something radically new and interesting that still fits into the same series, or simply take the same mechanics and refine them while adding some new elements to make the sequel stand out. Portal 2 is a game that takes the latter approach. If you've played the first game, you will have absolutely no trouble jumping right into this one. It's a puzzle game where you'll go through the test chambers one after another, all of which test you with the mechanics on display and the portals, which tie everything together. Similarly to the first Portal, this game is excellent at ensuring the player is given a proper tutorial for everything through gameplay. Outside of that short intro segment, you'll never be stopped to go over how each mechanic works in painstaking detail, and even then the intro just put button prompts on screen and integrated it into the dialogue. Instead, Portal 2 once again follows a simple pattern. Introduce a mechanic in a controlled environment, and then expand on and combine it with other elements in the following chamber to test your knowledge of said mechanic's properties. For instance, momentum is reintroduced early on in this simple chamber, in which you'll just have to do a portal jump while holding a storage cube over to this button. In the next room, you'll have to do one portal jump to reach the cube, place it on the right side ledge, do another portal jump up to it, and place the cube on the button. Once you do, a platform activates, and of course, one more portal jump will get you up there. It's pretty cool. Similarly, the new laser mechanic comes in with a chamber very similar to the one with the energy ball, as it essentially performs the same function, but more instantaneous. I'll touch more on the puzzles as things go on, but suffice to say, Valve and the Portal team were at the top of their game yet again. Honestly, if the game was just this, where you navigate the abandoned facility with Wheatley and eventually manage to escape, it still would have been pretty great, but there's so much more to it than that. After those first few chambers, Chell reunites with Wheatley, and he gives this reassuring line for her.
Oh, brilliant! You did find a portal gun! Oh, do you know what? It just goes to show, people with brain damage are the real heroes in the end, aren't they, at the end of the day? Brave.
Thanks, Wheatley. This whole bit is yet another fantastic scene with him that I find funny on every single playthrough. He tries to disengage from the rail he's on, something that he was told would kill him. At first, he counts to 3, but chickens out because of the height, and then basically says screw it and throws caution to the wind.
Catch me, catch me! Ow!
Well, good news, he doesn't die from this, so whoever told him that was clearly lying. Why they would do that? I don't know, they're a dick. Wheatley then has to hack out of the chamber to access the maintenance areas.
Yeah, I can't do it if you're watching. Seriously, I'm not joking. Could you just turn around for a second?
Look, Wheatley, if you wanted to relieve yourself, all you had to do was ask, alright? Anyway, the next part is essentially walking through a straight passage, something that does happen more than once in this game. Not the most exciting gameplay on its own, but what makes it worthwhile is the consistently entertaining story, and later on the set pieces. In this first one, we make our way to GLaDOS's ruined AI chamber, since we have to go through it and activate the escape lift to get out of the facility. This entire part has you carry Wheatley with the portal gun's 0-point energy manipulation, as he speaks with you and delivers some of the funniest lines I've ever heard. I find it difficult to write about, because the dialogue really speaks for itself.
Hello.
Oh no. Yes, hello, no, we're not stopping. Don't make eye contact, whatever you do. No, thanks, we're good. Appreciate it. Keep moving, keep moving.
We make our way under the chamber into the power room while looking for a switch that activates the escape pod. In this elevator looking thing, right below all the switches that will activate GLaDOS's power again. Wheatley accidentally engages the elevator and, I mean, what did you think was going to happen? He desperately tries to stop her from booting up, even resorting to attempting a brute force attack, a joke I wasn't able to understand until now. Unsurprisingly, none of this works and GLaDOS wakes up, instantly recognizing Chell too, might I add, because of course she would. I imagine it's kinda hard for a super smart AI like her to forget about that, especially since, you know.
I've been really busy being dead. You know, after you murdered me.
You did what?
She picks Chell and Wheatley up, seemingly killing the latter, and then drops us into the same incinerator we used to destroy her personality cores. It's here where the game's dynamics shift significantly, more closely resembling the first game because, GLaDOS is obviously back. In the incinerator room, we get a dual portal gun, a much earlier point than in the previous game, or at least it feels like that, and proceed forward towards what she has in store for us. We make our way through a familiar place, eventually emerging backwards out of the final test chamber from the original. All the while, GLaDOS's attitude reflects the circumstances.
Do you know the biggest lesson I learned from what you did? I discovered I have a sort of black box quick save feature. In the event of a catastrophic failure, the last 2 minutes of my life are preserved for analysis. I was able, well, forced really, to relive you killing me again and again, forever. You know, if you'd done that to somebody else, they might devote their existence to exacting revenge.
It's not just in this one instance. Throughout this entire section of the game, the bitterness she holds behind the cold and calculated robotic tone really comes out, leading to some more lines of pure comedic genius.
Sorry about the mess. I've really let the place go since you killed me. By the way, thanks for that.
Sarcasm self-test complete.
Oh good, that's back online. Well done. Here come the test results. You are a horrible person. That's what it says. A horrible person. We weren't even testing for that. Congratulations. Not on the test. Most people emerge from suspension terribly undernourished. I want to congratulate you on beating the odds and somehow managing to pack on a few pounds. Did you know that people with guilty consciences are more easily startled by loud noise? I'm sorry. I don't know why that went off.
Again, I must emphasize this game has incredible writing that, while admittedly slightly less subtle than the original, is consistently hilarious. In this next section of the game, we again go through test after test just like the first game, but the new chamber designs make it stand out. It's here where the aforementioned laser is introduced, once again in a very simple puzzle, after which it gets played with in increasingly complex yet still understandable ways. This includes the debut of the discouragement redirection cube, which I'll just call redirection cubes from now on for simplicity's sake, or just laser cubes. Its function is very simple and easy to infer from the name. Yeah, it redirects beams in whatever direction you place it. Enough said. While a pretty simple and even no-brainer mechanic to go along with the lasers, it's implemented well and used in pretty good puzzles. This part of the game also brings several new mechanics into the mix, all of which are positive additions. In fact, going back to the first Portal game and knowing they were absent felt really strange, because they all feel like such a natural fit for this series. First is the aerial faithplate, which I can most closely compare to springs or bounce pads from the Sonic series. Stepping on the plate launches you into the air, usually on a set path. It's both pure spectacle as well as a solid mechanic used in numerous puzzles to great effect. It also gets this great bit of dialogue out of GLaDOS.
Hey, it's me! I'm okay!
Well, I'm back. The aerial faithplate in here is sending a distress signal. You broke it, didn't you? There. Try it now.
See what happened, right? I was just lying there. You thought I was done.
This plate must not be calibrated to someone of your generousness. I'll add a few zeros to the maximum weight. You look great, by the way. Very healthy. Try it now.
weird, right? Couldn't believe it either.
You seem to have defeated its load-bearing capacity. Well done.
Oh yeah, and as you saw there, Wheatley showed up. Yeah, during this segment, he tries to meet up with you again, which he does more than once during moments GLaDOS is distracted, but ends up failing every time. What makes using faith plates so satisfying is the sound design. They make a supremely gratifying launch sound when engaged, and as you fly through the air, the game plays a musical sting emphasizing the action taking place. Portal 2 actually does that in more than one instance, typically to emphasize that you're getting close to solving a chamber. This is another element that feels weird not to be in the first game, since it just feels so natural. Which, by the way, I should probably mention this real quick, the music is extremely good. Portal 2 is the first game in the shared Half-Life Portal universe to have a soundtrack with no involvement from Kelly Bailey. Instead, Mike Moraski, who contributed a few tracks to the first game, takes the helm for this one, much like TF2, the Left 4 Dead games, and CSGO, and even Half-Life Alyx. While the unique, unmistakable sound that Bailey provided is sadly absent, that's not to discredit Mike Moraski's work whatsoever. He too is great at what he does, and the music of Portal 2 is, as I said, one of his best works. It takes a notably less atmospheric approach than the first game, instead being more action-packed on the whole, emphasizing the direction the game goes into more generally, to be honest. It seemed like Valve wanted to make Portal 2 feel much more like a grand adventure, all the while expanding on what the first game did so well, and the soundtrack complements that perfectly. It overall has an atmosphere of hope. Hope that we'll be able to make our way through GLaDOS's tricks and escape the facility once for all. That said, several tracks still lean into the direction of atmosphere, especially tracks like Love as a Construct. Oh, baby, that is some good stuff right there. In this initial GLaDOS-controlled section, the music is more or less like that, ramping up during set pieces which come later on. Near the end of the game, it gets especially intense, which I'll try to fit in when I get to that, assuming I can remember to. At any rate, I believe I was discussing new mechanics just a second ago. Sorry if this part of the video seems like a disorganized clusterfuck, but this is a really hard game to write about. All of its elements are so beautifully intertwined and play off of each other, mutually enhancing everything else. While this is great from a game perspective, it makes it absolute hell to write about without jumping around like this. With that said, back to the new mechanics. Sometime later into these chambers, GLaDOS brings in a light bridge, made of light she pumps in from the surface. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It's literally just a bridge you walk on that's made of light, after all. I should say though, the way you can use it is really cool. As with anything in this series, portals are the key here. All you have to do is place one where the bridge contacts a wall, and after that, placing the other portal makes the bridge come out of it. The angle at which the bridge is oriented also matters. If it's at a 0-degree angle, placing portals on the wall will make it come out normally, as expected, while putting it on the floor will make it come out pitched up 90 degrees. If the bridge goes straight down into the floor or ceiling, placing the other portal on a wall makes it come out oriented so you can walk on it. If the bridge is rolled 90 degrees to the side, it basically acts as a shield to block turret fire. Oh yeah, turrets are back in this game. Whoops, I almost forgot about that. And I had to look up 3D graphics terms like pitch, roll, and yaw and distinguish them to just fucking be able to... I don't have much more to say about the light bridge. It's a cool idea that, while simple, adds a fair bit of lateral thinking in many instances. Really, in general, it's GLaDOS's chambers where the game begins to soar. I already mentioned the dialogue, which always spices up the game.
If you solve this next test, maybe I'll let you ride an elevator all the way up to the break room. And I'll tell you about the time I saw a deer again.
And as usual, the visuals are downright phenomenal. I should probably also call attention to the return of the Ratman dens, which are even creepier than the last time around. Disturbing ambience plays while you're inside them, and there's even more creepy drawings and such within. On top of these aspects, it's here where the gameplay really starts firing on all cylinders, as mentioned. It has several puzzles that were actually able to stump me, and maybe really think through the solution. I think my favorite one of all is Chamber 18, oddly enough, which is the same number as one of the best chambers from Portal 1. Its intro is really funny, as GLaDOS reveals the surprise she had been teasing for a little while.
Initiating surprise in 3, 2, 1. I made it all up. Surprise. Oh, come on. If it makes you feel any better, they abandoned you at birth.
Anywho, this test involves lasers, a turret, a light bridge, and redirection cubes. It's a test that consistently stumps me every time I play the game, and requires some consideration of the beam's trajectory to activate all these floor receptacles. It could be because of my own stupidity, because it ultimately is as simple as using the cube to redirect the laser to the receptacles. For some reason I thought you had to do some crazy angular portal malarkey for this, but no, it's really just that simple. The chamber right after this is also another one of the best I can think of. It's huge and makes use of faith plates, lasers, redirection cubes, turrets, and momentum. Central to everything in this test chamber is the faith plate near the center of the room, which can be used to gain speed to transfer through portals, something you'll have to do to get all the cubes needed. These cubes are then used to redirect the laser above, which you'll need to destroy the turrets near the exit door with, redirect it into the receptacle, and then finish it off with one last use of the faith plates. It's yet another puzzle that requires real thinking, while being completely possible to reason your way through to solve without any sort of guide, just like Valve intended. After this chamber, there's another short one involving 3 lasers, but it's more or less a breather room meant to demonstrate that GLaDOS has finally finished repairing the Aperture's Enrichment Center. It looks really clean and modern, with no decay or overgrown plants to speak of, like something straight out of the first game. However, right as it seems like we're about to continue testing in the newly operational facility, things begin to shift yet again. That's the thing with Portal 2. You're never on to one thing for too long. The dynamic constantly shifts. A few chambers ago, Wheatley made another appearance when he temporarily breaks the door, telling us he's working on a way out. He needs a little more time, and GLaDOS quickly returns, so for now he leaves. Later on, he meets up with us on an elevator, once again demonstrating the sheer size of the facility, as he has some entertaining banter with some other robot called Jerry.
Yes, Jerry. Or maybe your prejudiced worksite should have accommodated a nanobot of my size. Thanks for the hate crime, Jer. See you in court, mate.
He says to hang in there for 5 more chambers, after which he'll help us escape. Which, since we're in an elevator, I might as well bring up that other minor complaint I have with the game I mentioned earlier, because it's pertinent. Instead of other games set in this universe, which never ever leave the first person perspective, attempting to make the loading screen seamless transitions to increase immersion, Portal 2 features more traditional loading that briefly leaves Chell's perspective. It makes the game feel a little more like a game and a bit less like an experience you're seeing play out from the character's eyes, if that makes any sense. That's not to say my immersion is completely ruined when the game loads a new area, it's just more video gamey. Not bad on its own, but slightly off-putting if you're used to how games from the Half-Life universe usually function. This is a supreme nitpick, however, and probably a necessary change given how comparatively advanced the visuals and environments are to other Source Engine games, so I'll move on. When you enter Chamber 21, it seems like everything is about to continue as normal. You start solving the test, and then the power just shuts off out of nowhere. The following then occurs.
Hey, buddy. I'm speaking in an accent that is beyond her range of hearing.
Look, Metal Ball, I can hear you.
Run! I don't need to do the voice. Run!
Oh, for God's sake, Wheatley, do you really think that was going to work? We're now on the run from GLaDOS, fleeing through the gargantuan maintenance areas of the facility yet again. It's here where Portal 2 sort of strays away from the pretense of being a strict puzzle game, much like the first game did in its maintenance areas, focusing more on set pieces and the storytelling. I've heard some criticism of this, but to be honest, I don't mind. If the game was nothing but constant puzzles throughout its runtime, that would get tiresome after a while. So introducing a new method of progression or level structure was a good choice, if you ask me. And it's not like the game strays so far from puzzle solving as to be some radically different thing during these segments. So sure, while they're not as great as the straight up puzzles, you'll still make heavy use of portals and whatnot in these areas, and as I said, the story unfolding in front of you makes it all worth it. At least for me. While running away, GLaDOS tries several tricks to lure you back into the test chambers, including a fake one that she just floods with neurotoxin if you enter it, crashing chambers into one another, and turrets. Several turrets. All the while, Wheatley leads Chell through the area, barely dodging each hazard that's laid out. It's an exciting chase sequence, culminating in a moment where GLaDOS tries to crush you to death with the aforementioned moving test chambers. Chell manages to escape and safely makes her way into a lift along with Wheatley. Holy crap, these visuals here are great. We end up in the dark manufacturing section of Aperture where all the testing items are assembled. That includes turrets, cubes, all sorts of stuff. This section has some of the best ambience in the game, including really noisy factory sounds that still produce a lonely feeling. Not the same oppressive, almost apocalyptic liminal space feel as the first game, mostly because you're not completely alone with Wheatley by your side and all that, complete with his usual ramblings.
They say that the old caretaker of this place went absolutely crazy. Chopped up his entire staff of robots. All of them robots. They say at night you can still hear the screams of their replicas. All of them functionally indistinguishable from the originals. No memory of the incident. Nobody knows what they're screaming about. Absolutely terrifying. Though obviously not paranormal in any meaningful way.
but getting there. One area in particular with these huge glass tubes transporting testing apparatus has a noisy soundscape that strikes one of my nostalgia nerves. When I first played this game, I lived in a house situated on a semi-dead-end street, very close to my city's lakeside industry. I say semi-dead-end because, I mean, the street technically ended, but there was still like a gravel pathway you could drive through. It was very active back then, so I heard its sounds fairly consistently, and it sounded oddly familiar to this particular ambient track. As a result, I can't help but love the hell out of it. In traveling through this section of the facility, we're trying to find a way out, which again requires going through the central AI chamber. GLaDOS is waiting there just ready to kill Chell, so we'll have to dismantle the operation from the inside. We come across the turret production and testing line, and hatch a plan to shut down the system. It contains a lot of live turrets, both normal and defective, so you'll have to tread carefully to avoid getting killed. Eventually, the turret control center is seen, which uses a template to ensure defective turrets are thrown into an incinerator. In a stroke of genius, Chell grabs a defective turret and replaces the template with it, tricking the machine into tossing away operational ones. Oh yeah, and Wheatley hacks the door open yet again using an absolutely ingenious method.
You'll need to turn around while I do this.
Response.
Hello.
Done! Hacked!
And he gets bamboozled by the vault door while doing the same for it.
No! How long's the door been open?
Next in line is for us to destroy the neurotoxin generator, another staple of GLaDOS's deadly arsenal. Once this is disabled, we're basically ready to go and confront her. Wheatley isn't sure how to disable the system and once again resorts to hacking, this time seemingly trying to carry out some sort of dictionary attack on the password. What he doesn't know is that it's rather simple to destroy the generator. Just put a portal on this back wall that has a laser beam shooting into it, and then melt open the transport tubes using these moving walls. The only instance in the entire series where you could see a moving portal. It causes the generator to completely collapse, and wow man, I still can't believe this game came out in 2011. That is some seriously impressive looking animation. Following the destruction, a transport tube breaks open, sucking Wheatley and Chell in and leading straight in towards GLaDOS's chamber. We once again get one last glimpse of how truly vast this facility is on the way, as Wheatley gets separated from us once again. One quick navigation to the chamber later, and
I honestly, truly didn't think you'd fall for that. In fact, I devised a much more elaborate trap further ahead for when you got through this easy one. If I'd known you let yourself get captured this easily, I would have just dangled a turkey leg on a rope from the ceiling.
aw, shit. She got us. We come face to face with her yet again as she attempts to kill Chell like she has before. But we're prepared this time around. First, some turrets get sent in, which are of course all defective.
Oh. You were busy back there.
Second, she tries the typical backup plan, her MO neurotoxin, but that also fails because of the whole generator getting blown up thing.
Warning. Neurotoxin pressure has reached dangerously unlethal levels.
Alright, that quote's genius. Nothing more to say about that. Anyway, we've managed to surprise GLaDOS, who says 5 simple words that summarize her current situation perfectly.
I hate you so much.
Suddenly, the system detects that GLaDOS's AI core, the hemispherical head that she has, is 80% corrupt. Which reminds me, I never mentioned something else I wanted to briefly touch on, GLaDOS's design change. Both her Portal and Portal 2 iterations look almost the same, especially with the whole hanging woman resemblance, but there's noticeable differences. Her core had a retro sci-fi look to it in the first game, but here it appears more modern. It may simply be a retcon, which Valve games are known to have in them, so it could just be the case that she was meant to always look like this, much like most character redesigns. But I like to think that the party escort bots dragged her back in and updated her parts. It's not because this necessarily makes much sense, it's because I think it's funny. A small robot or group of robots was able to drag this huge mess of wires and metal back into the facility, upgraded her, and didn't think to re-enable her power for some reason. Again though, back to what I was talking about. The system also detects Wheatley's presence, and begins the core transfer protocol. Chell places Wheatley into the machine, and the system prepares to do the transfer, but not before asking both cores nicely.
Substitute core. Are you ready to start the procedure?
Yes!
Corrupted core. Are you ready to start the procedure?
No.
Oh, yes she is.
No.
A stalemate is detected, and a button needs to be pressed by a stalemate associate. GLaDOS once again does everything to stop you from pressing the button, but with the portal gun we're easily able to bypass the panels that get put in our way. Once pressed, the system administers an electric shock, or at least that's what it looks like, to GLaDOS, and the core transfer begins.
Wait, what if this hurts? What if this really hurts? Ah, I didn't think of that.
Oh, it will. Believe me, it will.
Are you just saying that, or is it really gonna hurt? You're just saying that, aren't you? No, you're not. It is gonna hurt, isn't it? Exactly how painful are we
Get my hands off me. No. Stop. No.
Wow, looks like she was right. That sure did seem painful. How do robots feel pain anyway? Anyway, Wheatley gets full control of the facility and gets a rush from the newfound power he has. With him now in control of everything, all seems well and we're ready to get out of there. He calls the escape lift and sends us on our merry way. Seems like the game's over.
This body's amazing, seriously. I can't get over how small you are, but I'm huge. Actually, why do we have to leave right now?
Oh yes. Did you really think it would be that easy? Wheatley has a sudden shift in personality. His new immense overwhelming power makes him realize how small we are, and he begins to believe that he was the one who did all the work. It's GLaDOS then that gives him a reality check saying how Chell was the one who did all this. Enraged, Wheatley demonstrates his newfound dominance by turning GLaDOS into a potato. He realizes that all he did was sacrifice himself for nothing in return, and that Chell apparently had bossed him around. When GLaDOS turns into a potato, she reveals the backstory behind Wheatley.
I know you.
Sorry, what?
The engineers tried everything to make me behave, to slow me down. Once, they even attached an intelligence dampening sphere on me. It clung to my brain like a tumor, generating an endless stream of terrible ideas.
No, not listening.
It was your voice.
So yeah, he was himself a personality core meant to be put on GLaDOS, constructed to give her a constant stream of stupid ideas, effectively inhibiting her ability to think clearly by design. This flips a switch in his brain and causes him to go berserk. He punches the elevator into a pit below, which causes it to break and fall down into it.
Well, how about now? Now who's a moron? Could a moron punch you into this pit? Ah! Could a moron do that? Uh-oh.
Holy shit, what a moment. I've already complimented the acting in not only this series, but also other Valve games, and it's times like this where it becomes especially evident. It's crazy just how good or at least entertaining it consistently is in this series. Whether it's the campy sci-fi B-movie goodness of Half-Life 1, or genuinely great like it is here in Portal 2 and many other of their games. And really, it just keeps getting better from here. The next chapter, The Fall, begins with an absolutely iconic sequence where we fall down this huge pit as GLaDOS grills us with her trademark sardonic nature.
Oh, hi. So, how are you holding up? Because I'm a potato. Oh, good. My slow clap processor made it into this thing. So we have that.
She also elaborates on Wheatley's purpose in being built, really trying to sell how bad of an idea it was for Chell to put him inside the AI system.
He's the product of the greatest minds of a generation, working together with the express purpose of building the dumbest moron who ever lived. And you just put him in charge of the entire facility. Good, that's still working.
Eventually, we come crashing down into a bunch of wooden planks near the pit's bottom, indicating that we're entering territory of Aperture that's now abandoned or otherwise closed off. Chell wakes up, seeing GLaDOS get taken away by a bird, as she begins to make her way through the bottom of this huge pit. It's in complete disrepair, with huge cranes, giant metal scraps, and fires everywhere. Above, you can see presumably defunct modern GLaDOS-style test chambers, alongside these huge pillars with numbers indicating the area we're in. Walking through this place, an entrance to a condemned testing area can be found, which you have to make your way into with portals, of course. The following section of the game is one that sticks out in my mind as one of the best, in basically every aspect too, but especially the visuals and story. Remember how I said Portal 2 was originally to be set in the 1980s and explore Aperture's history during the f-stop phase of development? Well, Valve knew that doing that, exploring their history, was an incredible idea, and so couldn't resist adding in a part where we explore the backstory of this company and get exposed to its dark historical secrets to explain how things got to the point they did in the first place. At first, we know that this part of the facility was closed down and condemned, but for what reasons we're unsure right now. Some posters have vague references to cosmic ray spallation elements and other such hazards, but that's about it. We also have to open this huge hatch, which serves as a back employees only entrance. It has two buttons that were meant to be operated by more than one person, but with a portal gun, pretty much anything is possible. Once both buttons are pressed, the door ominously opens as alarms start blaring. Oh, you've got to be. Now that's a brilliant visual gag with an amazing setup and payoff. Valve knew exactly what they were doing here and even jokingly said they would include this huge hatch as a selling point, putting "has the biggest door in all of video games" on the back of the box. I don't know what else to say. I love that. It's stupid in the best way possible. Once through the hatch, what lies ahead is the bottom of Test Shaft 09 proper, with acidic liquid and old decayed architecture. A date on the wall indicates that this deep part of Aperture was built all the way back in 1952. Making our way into a door that's open a crack, we can get into the facility's proper entrance, as a pre-recorded message greets us.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Aperture Science. Astronauts, war heroes, Olympians, you're here because we want the best, and you are it. So, who is ready to make some science?
I am.
Now, you already met one another on the limo ride over, so let me introduce myself. I'm Cave Johnson. I own the place. That eager voice you heard is the lovely Carolyn, my assistant. Rest assured, she has transferred your honorarium to the charitable organization of your choice. Isn't that right, Carolyn?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson.
She's the backbone of this facility. Pretty as a postcard, too. Sorry, fellas. She's married. To science.
What you just heard was the voice of Aperture Science founder Cave Johnson, voiced by the great J.K. Simmons. He's a great actor and consistently fits basically every role that he takes up, and being the voice of Cave Johnson is no exception to this. Really, I can't imagine anyone else voicing him, because Simmons managed to capture his personality perfectly. He's an absent-minded, and as we'll see later, downright psychotic individual who has absolutely no regard for those around him. That's completely evident in how he runs Aperture, which can be inferred from the voice recordings that play to guide his test subjects. Cave was an ambitious man, but got caught up in the theatrics of science rather than the true significance of it. He hired war heroes, Olympians, astronauts, and other such prestigious test subjects to make Aperture seem more sophisticated than it really was, even purchasing a huge salt mine in Upper Michigan to construct this huge facility to essentially show off. In reality, though, Aperture began as a shower curtain company in the 1940s, and somehow managed to get contracts from the Department of Defense from selling shower curtains to the military. God damn it, I love this serious sense of humor. He then used the money from this to transform his company to a general research firm, renaming it to Aperture Science Innovators. Then he purchased the salt mine, yada yada, so on and so forth. Accompanying him is his assistant Carolyn, voiced by the same actress as GLaDOS and the Turrets, as well as the administrator from TF2, and the Combine Overwatch from Half-Life 2, really a lot of things, Ellen McLean. She doesn't stand out as much as Cave, but make sure to keep her in mind. She will be a very important character later on. Cave Johnson is definitely one of my favorite characters from this series, right up there with GLaDOS for sure. I already mentioned how good J.K. Simmons' acting is, and what really sells it is the writing yet again. When I said Cave is reckless a minute ago, he really is. He does all sorts of horrible things to his test subjects, involving them in extremely unethical experiments that, even by his own admission, are just being done for the sake of doing them instead of actually testing a theory or something like that. You know, like how science is usually supposed to be done. Even in the lobby room, this sort of thing can be heard.
Those of you who volunteered to be injected with praying mantis DNA, I've got some good news and some bad news. Bad news is we're postponing those tests indefinitely. Good news is we've got a much better test for you. Fighting an army of mantis men. Pick up a rifle and follow the yellow line. You'll know when the test starts.
Also, if you pay attention, you can find some condemned test chambers that house even more wild shit, as indicated by the messages left outside of them.
If you've cut yourself at all in the course of these tests, you might have noticed that your blood is pure gasoline. That's normal. We've been shooting you with an invisible laser that's supposed to turn blood into gasoline, so all that means is it's working. If you need to go to the bathroom after this next series of tests, please let a test associate know, because in all likelihood, whatever comes out of you is going to be coal. Only temporary, so do not worry. If it persists for a week, though, start worrying and come see us, because that's not supposed to happen. Just a heads up, we're going to have a superconductor turned up full blast and pointed at you for the duration of this next test. I'll be honest, we're throwing science at the wall here to see what sticks. No idea what it'll do. Probably nothing. Best case scenario, you might get some superpowers. Worst case, some tumors, which we'll cut out.
Cave clearly had no regard for the safety of others, and like I said, he had his scientists do these experiments just because they could. When you think about it that way, it's actually pretty dark. But what makes it so funny is his nonchalance towards such dangerous circumstances, much like GLaDOS and the automated voice from the first part of the game. He brushes off people getting tumors or having their piss turned into literal coal as just a mild inconvenience to deal with, again playing into that dark comedy angle that Portal 2 has in abundance. Also, can I just say, this part of the game has some of my favorite visuals? It's one of the 5 tangents I'm on right now. It has more of that dilapidated appearance that the early parts of the game had, except now with decaying 1950s architecture. I think this is what launched my interest in old underground facilities like this, because it's fascinating to just look around and imagine what took place here when it was still open, as well as fantasizing about what's lying just beyond what we can see. Another thing about Cave Johnson that makes me love this old Aperture segment so much is the character progression he goes through. Again, I apologize if this review is a brain-melting fustercluck, but there's just so much to discuss about this game, I'm finding it very hard to talk about in a digestible manner. Anyway, throughout the entirety of these areas, the story is told through Cave's pre-recorded messages. During the 1950s areas, Cave appears very enthusiastic, because after all, he had prestigious test subjects to use, and is, as established, obsessed with vanity. I already mentioned that the unethical nature of Aperture's experiments can be uncovered early by observant players, but you'll still get hints to Cave's true nature while going through the tests themselves, which doubles as foreshadowing through the eventual mental decline he'll experience. For instance, after you solve one of the chambers, he can flat out be heard firing one of his employees when they complain about the unsafe nature of his experiments, which he left in the recording.
Why is so much of our science dangerous? Why not marry safe science if you love it so much? In fact, why not invent a special safety door that won't hit you on the butt on the way out, because you are fired? Now you test subject, you're doing fine. Yes, you, box your stuff, out the front door, parking lot, car, goodbye.
Additionally, the testing spheres the chambers are set in, which look amazing by the way, are all made of asbestos just as a mean of keeping out pests, which Cave is also very upfront about.
All these science spheres are made of asbestos, by the way. Keeps out the rats. Let us know if you feel a shortness of breath, a persistent dry cough, or your heart stopping, because that's not part of the test. That's asbestos.
He also makes several references to unethical actions carried out while testing the repulsion gel, including endangering test subjects because of its potentially toxic nature, having it pump experimental genes into their cells, and of course, and yet I even mentioned the remark about blue paint.
You're not part of the control group, by the way. You get the gel. Last poor son of a gun got blue paint. All joking aside, that did happen. Broke every bone in his legs. Tragic, but informative. Or so I'm told.
It goes to show that, again, while Aperture had a good reputation back then, they did some downright questionable, illegal, and even immoral things to their employees. This will be explored even further in the later sections of this part of the game. Just you wait. Before that, there's something I need to discuss though. I mentioned something called repulsion gel. What the hell is that? In this initial 1950s section of Old Aperture, all the tests are built around a special colored gel, yet another new mechanic that Portal 2 introduces. Which, by the way, quick side tangent, I should mention that the developer of the gels was inspired by a game called Tag the Power of Paint by developer Tag Team, who, kind of like Nuclear Monkey, were brought on to help with the development. Anyways, back to the video. The gel's flow needs to be activated in a pumping station, after which you're able to proceed into the test chambers proper. The first gel we encounter, colored blue, is called the repulsion gel, which acts like a trampoline. When you make contact with it, you'll bounce off the surface, which includes off of walls. It's kind of like the aerial faith plate, but more versatile. It also preserves your speed, meaning you'll travel through the air quicker if you hit the gel while traveling fast, vertically or horizontally. More often than not, the gel comes out of pipes or drips from somewhere, so you'll have to direct the gel drops with portals. It can also cover objects such as cubes, making them bouncy, and can be cleaned off if a water pipe is present. I love this mechanic as it adds another whole new dimension to the puzzle design yet again. It makes the entire Old Aperture segment stand out, much like how a certain other mechanic does the same for a later section of the game, which I'll get to later obviously. The gels are, as with everything else, introduced gradually so that the player doesn't get lost or confused with them. At first, the gel is already on the floor, where all you need to do is jump on it and grab a cube to activate a button. Immediately following this chamber, you'll end up in one that's a bit more complex, involving jumps from various heights with portal surfaces that appear when cubes are placed on buttons. It also introduces bouncing off walls, which isn't used as much, but always cool whenever it is. All sorts of other tests follow this one, all of which being more complicated gel placement chambers. One involves flinging the gel through an emancipation grill by properly placing portals. Another has a timing puzzle with a button that deactivates falling water so you can quickly place gel, after which you have to put it on the wall and use momentum to travel on it, while Cave blabbers on about time travel or something.
If you meet yourself on the testing track, don't make eye contact. Lab boys tell me that'll wipe out time. Entirely. Forward and backward. So, do both of yourselves a favor and just let that handsome devil go about his business.
Which then culminates in this open area that requires considering your portal placements to get into the next chamber with the gel. And for the last chamber, that's where the bouncy box comes in. You cover the cube in gel, clean it off, place it on the button which lowers the exit lift, and then use portals to cover the cube again so it bounces off and allows the lift to go up again. Pretty cool and fun to figure out. Cave then fires that one employee, displaying his true dickishness that he's not even trying to hide anymore, and we end off in the then official exit of the facility with an elevator to the surface. That's completely blocked off. All hope seems lost, but thankfully the next section of aperture, indicated by another date on the wall as having been constructed in 1971, is really close by and has convenient portal conducting services. Another gel pumping station with more stunning visuals later, and an orange gel is now flowing into the section of the facility located directly above alongside the repulsion gel. It can then be accessed with a hallway that already screams 1970s, revealing yet another amazing looking area. It's this gigantic, almost airport looking glass control room that's nearby more broken down infrastructure in this giant metal 70s ass logo for the company. Cave Johnson introduces himself yet again, welcoming the test subjects, except things seem different with how he's talking about them.
Now you might be asking yourself, Cave, just how difficult are these tests? What was in that phone book of a contract I signed? Am I in danger? Let me answer those questions with a question. Who wants to make $60? Cash. You can also feel free to relax for up to 20 minutes in the waiting room, which is a damn sight more comfortable than the park benches most of you were sleeping on when we found you.
It's fairly clear what went on during this area of aperture already, but allow me to indulge anyway, because this is interesting character progression that starts to show not only the company's, but also Cave's decline. As I went over, Aperture had a great reputation in its early days, being seen as a prestigious organization worthy of the expensive test subjects they had. But behind this facade, they conducted extremely dangerous experiments with no consideration for safety standards. They also got into competition with Black Mesa, consistently losing to them in the race for government funding. Cave started to get suspicious that Black Mesa was guilty of industry espionage, stealing Aperture's technologies and claiming them as their own.
Black Mesa can eat my bankrupt...
Sir, the testing?
Right.
Although he had no proof of this. It only made Cave even more willing to carry out horrific experiments, but this would end up biting Aperture in the ass. Astronauts who were among the test subjects went missing while on the job in their facility, leading to suspicions from the outside world. In fact, it stirred up the public to the point the company was involved in some Senate hearings in 1968 regarding those astronauts. It made Cave condemn the lower parts of the shaft where those experiments took place, constructing the new areas we're in right now. Cave tried to lay low, as his company was in the midst of controversy that tainted its once spit-shining image. Aperture was no longer able to hire prestigious subjects such as astronauts, Olympians, or war heroes like they went with before, because the scandals the company was dealing with led to a severe dip in its stock prices, causing a huge financial decline and eventually bankruptcy. Instead of the aforementioned test subjects, Cave had to settle for plucking ordinary people, usually the homeless or impoverished, from the streets. And with how obsessed he was with the image of his company, this clearly didn't go well. Cave didn't even try to hide his contempt anymore, outright insulting the new subjects. He continued to conduct harmful experiments on these people, offering the measly reward of $60 for completing the entire testing track. On top of that, he made an additional offer. If the subjects allowed Aperture to completely disassemble them and put them back together, they'd earn an extra $60. For what purpose? I don't know, science, I guess. Again, this company had a habit of doing things just because, which is what makes this section of the game so delightfully dark. It's the kind of humor that crosses the line twice. Cave's lack of empathy is, again, appalling when you think about it, but it's done in such a way that it manages to wrap around to being funny again. Oh yeah, and something completely interesting is hiding right above the large main control building, in a spot that can be reached with a well-placed portal. It seems to be a fairly standard room that once again screams the decade it was built in from even a cursory glance. But the interesting part comes in when you go through this hidden door. Like in the 1950s area, several secret experiments reveal themselves through intercoms next to their entry doors. And also like the 1950s ones, they're chock full of more of that cynical comedic writing style that this game does so well.
If you're allergic to peanuts, you might want to tell somebody now, because this next test may turn your blood into peanut water for a few minutes. On the bright side, if we can make this happen, they're going to have to invent a new type of Nobel Prize to give us, so hang in there. The average human male is about 60% water. As far as we're concerned, that's a little extravagant. So if you feel a bit dehydrated in this next test, that's normal. We're going to hit you with some jet engines and see if we can't get you down to 20 or 30%.
But the true point of interest comes in with the one that's at the end of the hallway.
Alright, we're working on a little teleportation experiment. Now, this doesn't work with all skin types, so try to remember which skin is yours, and if it doesn't teleport along with you, we'll do what we can to sew you right back into it.
Yeah, thanks, Cave. It's a teleportation experiment. Big deal in this universe, right? That seems to be done every other day of the week. And guess what, though? This one is critically important. One doorway is open, leading into a large empty room with seemingly no purpose. Like, what the hell is this doing down here? What was it used for? Well, that is until you notice a life preserver on the catwalk. This isn't any old room. This is the Borealis' dry dock, that ship we saw in Half-Life 2 Episode 2, where it was revealed that the ship contains a promising project. However, before it could be completed, it disappeared along with a piece of its dry dock. Well, here's that very dry dock, and spoiler alert, there sure as hell ain't no ship here. Now that is how you do an Easter egg in a game. I find it so cool that Valve actually included it, as it finally connects every loose end in this universe. Oh, well, except for the cliffhanger to end all cliffhangers, but you see what I'm getting at here. I'm sure it inspired hope in many that another entry in the Half-Life series was on its way, since it was a sign Valve himself had not forgotten about it. Well, that's a bit sad in retrospect, since it still took almost a decade after Portal 2 to get another game in this universe, but I mean, it's a cool Easter egg at least. It's in this area of Test Shaft 09 where we reunite with GLaDOS, as indicated by the chapter title, The Reunion. She's been taken to a bird's nest as it tries to eat her, because, you know, she's a potato now. Shell manages to scare off the bird after GLaDOS asks her to kill it.
Say, you're good at murder. Could you, murder this bird for me?
And GLaDOS begins to talk about the dangers of letting Wheatley stay in control of the facility above.
That idiot doesn't know what he's doing up there. This whole place is going to explode in a few hours if somebody doesn't disconnect him.
Yeah, Wheatley is apparently so stupid and incompetent at maintaining it that the place will quite literally explode in a matter of hours. That's where any random tremors experienced during this part of the game come from. He's evidently royally screwing things so badly up there that the place is on the verge of collapse. GLaDOS is the only one who can stop the facility's destruction from happening, and so Chell has to begrudgingly form an alliance with her to prevent Wheatley from letting the entire place perish.
You stabbed me. What is wrong with you? Hold on. Do you have a multimeter? Never mind. The gun must be part magnesium. It feels like I'm outputting an extra half a volt. Keep an eye on me. I'm going to do some scheming. Here I go.
Okay, alright then, I see how it is. For whatever reason, I find the lines from GLaDOS' potato form while she's on the portal gun to be some of the funniest in the game. If I had to guess, it's probably a combination of things on top of the lines themselves, rather than just one specific thing. Her delivery, her muffled voice as a result of the potato's low power and thus poor sound capabilities, the way her eye blinks and flashes when she talks, and how she temporarily shuts down with an oddly entertaining crash sound effect when she gets worked up. The mere idea that this once powerful AI that had full control of this huge underground complex is now nothing more than a potato battery. It's all just a bunch of legendary stuff that compounds, reinforces one another into this one joke that's it's just funny. Also, I love the idea of two bitter antagonists who hate each other teaming up for one greater good that you should know by now. At any rate, one portal jump into the huge logo gets us into the first 1970s enrichment sphere, inside which something happens that lays the seed for one of the central plot twists of the Portal series. It's simple, but critical to the backstory of these games.
Did anything happen while I was out?
The testing area is just up ahead. The quicker you get through, the quicker you'll get your $60.
Hold on.
Carolyn, are the compensation vouchers ready?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson. Why did I just... Who is that? What the hell is going on here?
Hilarious outburst from GLaDOS at the end there aside. Did you catch that? When Cave asked Carolyn a question, even if just in a pre-recorded message, GLaDOS responded to it in the same way Carolyn did, as if he was still sitting right there. It seems pretty obvious what the game's hinting at, and everyone familiar with this universe and its characters already knows what it builds up to. It's perhaps the most significant plot twist in the Portal series, revealing a lot about where one of the series' main characters came from and how they got to where they were. It's clear that Carolyn isn't just some random assistant character put in there for the sake of it. She has some sort of deeper connection to GLaDOS that's not fully clear at this point in the game. That connection continues to develop more the further Chell progresses through the test chambers. GLaDOS seems to think Cave's voice is very familiar and begins to recognize things about him, including this one Easter egg of a portrait with Cave and Carolyn that gives an achievement if you can find it. Which, by the way, better talk about those test chambers because there is some to say about them. Since this is the most organized video in the entire world, let's go back to that gel I mentioned, the orange one. Yeah, that's the next one introduced. I find the color really fitting for the 1970s. I don't know why, but I've always associated orange with that decade. Perhaps it has something to do with these wood panels from back then that seem to heavily feature the color, or at least one's close to it. I can't be alone on this one, right? Anywho, this is called the propulsion gel, which is perhaps the most fitting name that any of these gels have. Its concept is simple. Hold forward on a surface covered in the gel, and Chell will briefly channel the power of Sonic and rapidly accelerate, being able to reach a fairly decent speed if provided a solid amount of ground to run on. I cannot stress enough how satisfying this gel is to engage with. Not only is running at a high speed fun on its own, especially as a blue blur aficionado myself, but the extra emphasis placed on it with your view model moving quickly as well as the sound design is a real treat. Once again, Portal 2 has amazing sound design as a whole. The speed gained from the gel can of course be used with portals for transferring momentum through them, whether vertically to reach high places or at an angle to get launched at a fair distance. These next few test chambers take advantage of this, with the first one focusing on launching off ramps to get a cube, raise the ramp, and then reach a button with portals. After this one is a quick traversal challenge, which is notable since it actually combines two gels into one. You have to cover the floor with propulsion gel, top off the edge with repulsion gel, and then set up portals so that you gain speed from the former, gain height from the latter, and then end up flying over to the elevator from the next sphere. That was pretty fucking cool. The next chamber is noticeably more tricky and probably one of the toughest in the series, all things considered, which makes me really enjoy it. It's absolutely huge and may even be the remnants of several chambers that's since collapsed in on itself, leaving this giant open space. Although with how intentional every element seems, it was probably built this way. And you know how Aperture does with safety. This is another chamber that involves using both gels together. It has a pretty clear propulsion gel runway near the 2 gel sprinklers, which can be used to launch over to this platform with a cube on it with an angled portal surface. This cube has to be put on a button to flip over this panel, which itself has to be covered with propulsion gel before using it. There's then this ramp off in the distance to finally piece it all together, where the propulsion gel runway can be utilized together with the flyover to the, as I said, where the propulsion gel runway can be utilized together with it to fly over to the panel, propelling you to the exit. Yeah, there we go. And that's all for the 1970s section. Cave Johnson yet again shows his appreciation for the test subjects.
I don't know, Carolyn, what do these people buy? Tattered hats? Beer? Dirt?
And there's another dead end with the blocked off surface elevator. Well, good news, Aperture still continued to build upwards into the shaft and has one last pumping station, so we're not stranded here yet again. With yet another well-placed portal, we can make our way into the pump station Gamma. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to mention that each pumping station is codenamed with the Greek letter, Alpha, Beta, and of course Gamma. Typical science, bitches. Can't get enough of using Greek letters. They do make things sound really cool, though, I have to admit. Anyway, GLaDOS mentions how the name Carolyn seems familiar, but she can't remember why.
Carolyn, why do I know this woman? Did I kill her? Or... Oh my god. Look, you're doing a great job. Can you handle things for yourself for a while? I need to think.
Again, you all know where this is going. This pumping station is by far the trickiest. It has gels, pistons that can crush you, and momentum shenanigans. It introduces the final type of gel, which... Look, I know you see what I see. Based on the color, it's easy to infer what it does. No, and by that, I don't mean... Alright, I'll cut it with that joke. It's called conversion gel, and when a surface is covered with it, it's able to conduct portals. That's why it's white, to indicate its functionality. All portal surfaces have that color, so it makes perfect sense. Following a quick portal jump, we reach the welcome lobby for this section of the shaft, taking place in the 1980s. It's here where the offices start to more closely resemble the modern Enrichment Center. It has that sterile look, primarily white and gray colored walls, IBM PC looking computers with old CRT monitors, glass office blocks, and generally more modern technology. It's also here where the company's name is changed to Aperture Laboratories, and where it adopted the modern logo in use by the time of the first portal. This is by far the shortest section of this old testing shaft, containing a single proper test chamber, but it's perhaps the most critically important area as far as backstory goes. So right off the bat, you can tell that something was up with Cave during this period.
Welcome to the Enrichment Center. Since making test participation mandatory for all employees, the quality of our test subjects has risen dramatically. Employee retention, however, has not.
He sounds weak, almost like something is happening to him. Well, I'll just let the man himself explain the situation.
The bean counters told me we literally could not afford to buy $7 worth of moon rocks, much less 70 million. Bought them anyway, ground them up, mixed them into a gel. And guess what? Ground up moon rocks are pure poison. I am deathly ill. Still, it turns out they're a great portal conductor. So now, we're going to see if jumping in and out of these new portals can somehow leach the lunar poison out of a man's bloodstream.
Cave's company has fallen on even harder times, dipping further and further into financial ruin. With the company being so far gone, he's made testing mandatory for all employees, raising the quality of test subjects but destroying employee retention because, well, it's hard to keep a lot of employees when they're all dying every other day on the job. So much so, he announces plans to phase out human testing, implying that Aperture will use robots instead. Despite warnings from the company's financial advisors, he decided to purchase millions of dollars worth of moon rocks, which he ground up and mixed into a gel, that of course being the conversion gel we just briefly encountered and will encounter again in a minute. This ended up being a poor decision, not only monetarily, but also just generally. Cave notes how lunar rocks are pure poison, and that he's come down with a potentially terminal illness. He tries to see if he can get rid of the poison with portals, saying,
When life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Make sure to keep that quote in mind for later, because you'd better believe it will come back in full force in just a moment. In this era's singular chamber, the whole thing is covered with non-portal surfaces, and in the center of the room is a piped spraying conversion gel. This puzzle is really simple. Just cover this angled wall with these pillars with gel, keep using portals to coat the entirety of the pillars, and then set up the portals in such a way you can use momentum to launch through the air from the angled wall. Probably the weakest singular part of this entire old Aperture segment, but it is kind of only the first part of a longer section. However, before that continues, there's something very important I'm glossing over. It's only the most famous quote in the entire Portal series apart from anything to do with an untruthful cake. Cave Johnson has one last pre-recorded message for us, and he made sure to go out with a bang.
Alright, I've been thinking. When life gives you lemons, Don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad. I don't want your damn lemons. What am I supposed to do with these?
Take the lemons.
Demand to see life's manager. Make life rue the day it thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemons.
Oh, I like this guy.
I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down.
Burn his house down. Burning people. He says what we're all thinking.
This rant right here, it's well known for a reason. Not only is it downright funny, but it's also one of the most pivotal moments in Portal lore. Cave finally went off the deep end and turned into a raving old man as his physical health declined to critical levels. On the verge of passing on, he recorded the now infamous speech and had it play in the office for everyone to hear. It is, like I said, really hilarious with how creative he gets with ranting about lemons of all things, but he has a point in saying all of it.
If we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store a man's intelligence and personality on one? So I have the engineers figuring that out now. Brain mapping, artificial intelligence. We should have been working on it 30 years ago.
Instead of playing by what life has handed him, he's decided, screw that, and decides to make up his own rules and beat life at its own game. He's decided to pursue artificial intelligence, except not in the traditional sense where a computer program tries to replicate the functionality of the human brain. No, this is something a bit more advanced. Cave wants to take a man's intelligence and consciousness, namely his, and upload it to a computer so that he can cheat death and continue to run Aperture for the rest of eternity. However, as evidenced by the fact that Cave was nowhere to be seen in the first Portal game, he didn't make it in time. He knew this was a possibility and so had a backup plan, which would ultimately be the foundation of the current state of the facility.
I will say this, and I'm gonna say it on tape so everybody hears it 100 times a day. If I die before you people can pour me into a computer, I want Carolyn to run this place. Now she'll argue. She'll say she can't. She's modest like that, but you make her. Hell, put her in my computer, I don't care. Alright, test's over. You can head on back to your desk.
Carolyn would be put in charge as Aperture's administrator, should Cave die before he could be put into a computer, and she would be the one inserted into the in-development AI system when it was complete, whether she willfully agreed to or if she put up a fight. And that right there is the big reveal. Carolyn, who seemed to just be Cave's assistant from the start, and who GLaDOS only vaguely remembered, is actually GLaDOS herself. In fact, her name is an acronym standing for the Genetic Lifeform and Disk Operating System. The genetic lifeform part obviously being Carolyn. She's the one who had her intelligence and brain uploaded to the system, thus creating an AI with her experiences, memory, all that jazz. Well, at least on a surface level. I said when talking about Portal 1 that GLaDOS was significant trouble whenever she was switched on. That is, until the whole personality core system got introduced, then the disaster happened, leading into the events of the games from there. GLaDOS is Carolyn, but managed to suppress her personality and become a killing machine. It's then from here she took over the new enrichment center that was built on top of the old shafts, killed almost everyone, and began the permanent testing cycle in effect by the first Portal. We don't know if she was uploaded willingly, by the way, but based on how she acts, it seems she wasn't willing. GLaDOS, finding out about her origins, including remembering who she was and how she came to be the way she is, makes her have a noticeable change in tone. We just have to get out of the old part of the facility, which involves traveling up the inactive surface elevator as well as a half-finished construction site, which is fairly easy to navigate. There's not much noteworthy here to talk about, apart from this one moment where you use speed from a portal to bounce off of the repulsion gel. Hearing Cave's speech is also shown to have really motivated GLaDOS to help Chell to get her back in control of the facility. She's pumped to charge up there and remove Wheatley from the equation by any means necessary, and if they can't, well, at least they would have tried. Following this is a neat little puzzle with all three gels at the top. First, cover this wall with the conversion gel, and then place a portal such that the long stretch of the ground behind the splatter of repulsion gel is covered in the propulsion gel. Finally, line up your portals so that you can strategically place repulsion gel, and then replace your portal so that you can get a running start, bounce up to preserve your speed into the portal so you go flying out, hitting the splotches of blue gel and thus bouncing to the other side. Did that sound like a lot? Because honestly, it really isn't. There's several steps, yeah, but it's all really intuitive. Even paying attention, it shouldn't take too long to figure this out. Everything else is pretty easy from here, so it doesn't really need that much discussion. Just portal up to this ledge and continue from there. Although it is really damn cool when you flood this ventilation system with the conversion gel, which causes it to splash all over the place. After this place is another huge seal, leading back up to the modern facility. It needs to be opened by flipping a switch in the control room above, which can be reached with a portal momentum jump yet again, in a surprisingly precise alignment. In this room is a special poster that GLaDOS asked asks Shell to look at, which has a few paradoxes written on it. A foolproof plan will short-circuit Wheatley's mind by assaulting him with one of these bad boys. All that's left to do is open the hatch by pressing a button, again resulting in a visually stunning sequence. Seriously, man, how is this game able to make something as simple as a door opening the most fucking cool thing I've ever seen? 2011, by the way. Nevertheless, opening this door connects the gel flow from the lower sector of the facility to the modern one, and traveling through it reveals this huge expanse of springs resembling the earthquake protection mechanism from the real-life Cheyenne Mountain Complex. An elevator is just above, finally taking Shell and GLaDOS back to the modern enrichment center and thus concluding the old Aperture section. What a journey that was. I talked about it for ridiculously long because I've always loved the crap out of it. This is stuff that's been bottling up inside me since my first playthrough. It's the perfect blend of gameplay, visuals, sound design, and storytelling. While yes, its puzzles aren't quite as complex or brain-racking as other parts of the game, and some parts are just pure navigation, I don't really mind it all that much. What truly makes it stand out in my mind though is every other aspect. Test Shaft 09's ambience evokes feelings of abandoned places, being a long condemned and forgotten part of the facility after all. Its visuals further emphasize this, with all the ruined 20th century architecture and varied interior decor each era sports. The broken down catwalks and infrastructure, and the still surviving ancient technology that was always there, but just out of view in the first game. I love shit like this, because it's so fun to imagine what everything looked like when it was still open and actively maintained, what the people did down here, and what the purpose of each and every bit of architecture was. Also, and this is the most interesting to me, what else hides in these little parts that we don't get to see? There is one enrichment sphere we don't visit, visible from the clearly unfinished 1980s one, so what's inside that? For crying out loud, a map, as well as the simple fact the testing shaft we're in is numbered 09, reveals that there's at least 8 other shafts of the same size, containing God knows what inside them. What exactly do they contain that we don't see? What shenanigans did Cave Johnson get into over there, assuming he left similar pre-recorded messages for those shafts? It's so fun to speculate about this stuff, and it's a huge reason I love these games so much. Also, it's great getting to know the backstory behind GLaDOS, as well as Aperture's founder, how the company itself came to be, and its connections to the Half-Life storyline. Making our way into the elevator, GLaDOS and Shell are ready to rumble. They can hear Wheatley in the distance, going off on some strange turret cube hybrid monstrosities that he haphazardly created. As you'll see, haphazard is a perfect descriptor for how Wheatley runs the facility. He demands them to try and solve the test in delightful fashion.
Oh, that's funny, is it? Oh, it's funny because we've been at this for 12 hours and you haven't solved it either, so I don't know why you're laughing. You've got 1 hour! Solve it!
Oh, Wheatley, even when you're a madman having been corrupted by newfound power who completely betrayed us, you never fail to be funny. Upon walking into the chamber, we quickly solve it as GLaDOS gets Wheatley's attention and lays the paradox on him.
True. I'll go true. Yeah, that was easy. I'll be honest, I might have heard that one before though, sort of cheating.
It's a paradox. There is no answer.
Yeah, Wheatley is so dumb that even while in control of the entire facility, he doesn't understand what the hell the point of a paradox is. Logical contradictions like that should cause computer systems to bug out, but not Wheatley. Genius writing, if you ask me yet again. She reveals that Aperture's reactor core is in critical condition, and tries to convince him to fix it, which he just brushes off. As we just saw a minute ago, Wheatley was short on test subjects, but now that we're here, it works perfectly for him. The central AI system has a reward routine built in, where the core gets what's essentially a serotonin hit when a subject completes a test. He's craving this feeling like an addict chasing a high, and so sends Shell into his own custom testing track. This entire section of the game, in which Aperture is now fittingly referred to as Wheatley Laboratories, contains some of the best puzzles in the entire series, if not the best. They're considerably more complex and combine everything you've been playing around with into one final encore of chambers. At first, it begins with a test Wheatley built himself, simply called Test, where you press a button and a cube falls onto the large button, opening the door. The work of a true genius, that's for sure. He should have helped develop Frogger the Great Quest, he'd fit right in. Anyway, Wheatley seemingly has an eruption in his proverbial robotic pants from this, if you catch my drift. Then he decides that since building tests is so difficult, and he's lazy, we should just keep solving the same test over and over. Obviously though, this doesn't give him any satisfaction, and so he just finds a chamber lying around for us to do. Much like his style of speaking, Wheatley is very disorganized and does a poor job planning things, meaning he makes changes to the testing track on the spot. In the elevator, GLaDOS then makes a remark that makes me lose my shit every time I hear it.
Alright, so my paradox idea didn't work. And it almost killed me. Luckily, by the looks of things, he knows as much about test building as he does about logical contradictions.
Fucking I can't tell you how much I love this line. Even just watching it again to write this script, I can't help but die laughing. He knows as much about test building as he does logical contradictions. After the failed paradox plan, the test Wheatley just had us do, and everything else serving as a setup for this, the fact GLaDOS speaks those exact words in that exact tone, I don't know what else to say, it's perfection. A cherry on top of the sundae. Well, things don't look up for us very long, as the test chamber Wheatley found is one of GLaDOS's, well, except for...
Look at the word test there on the wall, that's brand new.
So this means the test can actually kill us. By this point, you may expect that the game has exhausted everything and is running out of things to do, but that's definitely not the case. Because it's in this chamber where the final major mechanic that Portal 2 brings to the table is introduced, the excursion funnels. There's also another small one later on, but this is the last new one to debut in a proper test chamber. It's basically a large tractor beam that's similar in function to the light bridge in that it can go through portals, except it continuously pushes you forward or pulls you backward depending on its color. Blue pushes, orange pulls. It's used in a variety of situations, such as crossing pits, transporting objects to hit buttons that otherwise can't be reached, you know, stuff like that. Much like all other new mechanics in this game, I like this thing. It looks cool, and is used quite well in some really good puzzles, whereas this mechanic is one of the more complex ones, requiring you to factor its direction, angle, position, and all that. It too is tutorialized with a gradual introduction. Its initial appearance is in an easy chamber where the solution is as simple as using portals with the funnel to grab this cube and then activate the button on the ceiling. In the next one, well, I'd best let Wheatley explain it for me.
Yeah, made this test myself out of smaller tests that I found lying around. Jammed them all together. Buttons, got funnels, bottomless pits are involved. It's got it all. It's got it all. Absolute dynamite.
So now he's just grabbing random chambers and forcing them together haphazardly to create new tests. This one in particular is the first funnel test to involve a pit, which makes it instantly more dangerous because it actually is possible to die. Really though, it's still a pretty simple chamber. In fact, Wheatley gets fed up with how long it supposedly takes us and tries to give us the solution, which...
Alright, okay, this is taking too long, okay? I'll just tell you how to solve the test, okay? See that button over there, alright? You just do...
That's why I can't help you solve the tests.
Never mind, solve it yourself. You're on your own.
Yeah, all you have to do is get up to the top of the funnel, and then again activate a ceiling button with it, which once again makes Wheatley react accordingly.
Oh, yes. Well done.
Thanks. All we had to do was pull that lever.
What? Well, no, you pressed the... Ah!
I know we're in a lot of trouble and probably about to die, but that was worth it.
Jesus, what is it with this part and having such entertaining dialogue? I know this review has partially been a gigantic clip show, and that's just because I really need to demonstrate each and every bit of it that stands out to me while I have the chance. It's that good. At any rate, the next chamber finally gives us some insight into how Wheatley builds these things, and once again, haphazard and cautionless are a perfect description.
Just as mementos, though.
And there we go. Be honest, you can't even tell, can you? Seamless.
This sort of thing happens quite frequently in this entire Wheatley Laboratory section, and basically all the test chambers start to look like this. I don't know if it's just me, but I've always thought the sections before and after the old Aperture part had similar yet distinct appearances from each other. I'd say the GLaDOS chambers are more laid back, while those from Wheatley have a notably heftier sense of dangerous and expansive industry to them. It makes the Wheatley portions feel larger, since you can constantly see the true vastness of this underground complex, as well as having a distinct feeling of finality that's difficult to explain in words. I suppose it all looks more futuristic and intimidating. I guess so, but if I could describe it in any way, here you go. Portal 2's early sections resemble the first Portal somewhat closely, where the enormity of Aperture is hidden behind a facade of sorts, while the later ones have a more sinister and grandiose feeling, almost like you can feel how far we've come in this journey, going through and experiencing so much in such a short period. This feeling only gets stronger as you progress further through Wheatley's tests, including the one I just left off on, because this is a video that's about as disorganized as Wheatley Laboratories itself. It's simple, just get to the other side with the funnel, grab the cube with it, and then use both it and the aerial faceplate on that side to bring the cube back and hit the button. Very easy, but again, an effective tutorial for the mechanic. After this test, Wheatley appears unsatisfied, which, as GLaDOS seems to imply, isn't a good thing. Well, that's of no concern right now, because in the very next chamber, we get another priceless exchange between GLaDOS and Wheatley, as well as the silent shell.
Alright, so that last test was seriously disappointing. Apparently, being civil isn't motivating you, so let's try her way, alright? Fatty, adopted Fatty, Fatty, no parents. What?
What exactly is wrong with being adopted?
What's wrong with being adopted? Lack of parents.
For the record, you are adopted and that's terrible.
And
Just
also,
work with me.
nothing. But some of my best friends actually are orphans.
Also,
But
look at her, you moron. She's not fat.
I am not a moron! Just do the test. Just do the test.
I can't tell you how much I love that. Much like most of the humor I've been showing you throughout this video, it's the kind of thing you wouldn't see in games today. Journalists would rip it apart and get mad over it, which I think is the reason humor in these games is usually so lame nowadays. It's games like this one, including all others Valve made in their prime, that aren't afraid to get creative with the types of jokes they tell. To be clear, I'm not saying I need or want every game to have a cynical sense of humor like this, and kind of push against the boundaries a little bit, but it's hard not to appreciate it with how stale so many things are these days in that regard. Anyway, this test is the first to involve reverse direction funnels, effectively finishing the tutorial chambers from Wheatley Laboratories. Yet again, this series is excellent at gradually dishing out every aspect of a mechanic needed, giving the player all the tools they need for the more complex puzzles. There's only one problem though. These chambers are all so good that if I keep going over all of them in such vivid detail, we're gonna be here all damn day. Heads up, I probably won't stick to this because I can't help myself. And as you can see, this video is getting exponentially fucking longer by the second anyway. So how about we just go over some highlights in both dialogue and gameplay. In other words, basically a quick fire round through this whole chapter because it's consistently great puzzles one after another. In the chamber after the one I was just talking about, Wheatley tries to compensate for being quite literally designed to be a moron in one of the most unsubtle possible ways.
Now he's playing classical music.
oh, sorry. I hope that didn't disturb you too much. Then it was the sound of books, pages being turned. So that's just what I was doing. Just reading books. So not a moron.
Yeah, as if we'd believe he reads philosophy books while listening to classical music. This chamber is a neat faith plate puzzle where you have to factor in the placement of the funnel to get a cube to a door. GLaDOS then confirms Wheatley is building up a resistance to the euphoric response upon test completion, so he's motivated to keep on testing and testing and testing for all eternity. However, eventually the diminishing returns set in, and no amount can be as satisfying as the first hit ever again. Drug metaphor aside, Wheatley moves the next chamber while we're still in it, which is cool to witness. This test brings back the light bridge, and we need to block a cube from going through an emancipation grill, opening the door by carefully moving it to the other side with portals. Again, all around solid stuff, but it's after this test where Wheatley's chambers really ramp up. These final 4 test chambers are tied with many of the GLaDOS chambers and old Aperture puzzles I highlighted as some of the best Valve has ever constructed. You can say they're the culmination of not only everything this game does so well, but what the whole Portal series taken together in its entirety accomplishes. Here you can tell they've just gone all out with their test designs, involving funnels, gels, turrets, faith plates, lasers, the various types of cubes, the whole 9 yards. Most of them also involve bottomless pits of some sort, making them just that much more challenging to solve. First, there's this really cool test that has a funnel, redirection cube and lasers, and a faith plate. The funnel is used to gain speed through a portal, which lets you grab a cube to block the laser powering it, after which the faith plate gives you momentum to grab the redirection cube, allowing you to redirect the laser through a portal, lowering the exit lift. Just position the Franken turret on the inactive funnel, hop on the elevator, move the redirection cube away to raise it and reactivate the funnel, and finally place portals so the cube can travel through the funnel and press the button to finish the chamber. Whew! All around, fantastic puzzle, and as always, you need some lateral thinking to figure it out. And it makes you feel like a genius when you do. Second in line of these 4 is the one I remember the most of all the Wheatley chambers. By this point, Wheatley is still in full denial mode from the facility's reactor core melting down, which, while funny, keeps on ratcheting up that constant sense of tension this entire area has. This test also does that through visuals, with that huge ominous laser grid, and especially its sound design. Just take this in for a second. It's that same industrial drone I pointed out way earlier during the escape scene from GLaDOS, except even scarier now because you can actually see how far down the pit below stretches. In terms of the actual puzzle, it's also pretty cool. The laser grid can be deactivated with the beam below, and the platform can be made to move with it too. So it's a puzzle of moving the platform into the grid, deactivating it and walking to the other side, then moving the platform again. Basically a positioning challenge. The door must then be opened by getting back up there after grabbing a redirection cube below, repeating the grid dodge maneuver, then direct the beam to the receptacle with portals in the cube. Simple, satisfying, not much more you need to do than that, to be honest. After this test, there's also the set piece with a falling chamber that nearly crushes Chell and GLaDOS, as Wheatley accidentally shuts the funnel off and nearly kills us. Just a neat moment of source engine physics that, like in Neurotoxin Sabotage, is insanely impressive and still looks good today. Following that chamber is another really good one. Instead of a faith plate and lasers being used with the funnel, it's the propulsion gel being pumped from the lower parts of Aperture. This chamber is noteworthy because of an Easter egg that shows up in it. Wheatley needs to make an exit for you and ends ends up mashing another chamber into the one we're in. But if you zoom in on just the right spot, you'll observe a weird robot that looks at you from a distance and then runs away like he's G-Man or something. That was Peabody, one of the 2 robots from the Cooperative Testing Initiative, the co-op mode of the game. So yes, it's canon. Also, Wheatley announces that he has a surprise for us. Knowing how that's gone in this series, this can only end well. Anyway, this test is great and is yet another one that feels amazing to figure out. Its funnel is powered by the button, so we need a Franken turret cube to hold it down and keep it active. When dispensed, it ends up on these panels, and you have to grab it by manipulating the funnel with portals, while you stand on the button. You can then put the cube on another button in this room, only accessible with portals, to start dispensing gel, and then just put the cube on the button for the funnel, get to the other side with it, set up a portal behind the Emancipation Grill, send the funnel through, and then use the propulsion gel to get over there. Like with all these tests, it shouldn't take you too long to figure that out if you're paying attention, but it's such a cool combination of mechanics and isn't immediately obvious, which makes it satisfying to solve. After this test, Wheatley teases his surprise yet again, attempting to be subtle, but his typical style of writing shines through and prevents that.
You two are gonna love this big surprise. In fact, you might say you're going to love it to death. You'll love it until it kills you till you're dead. All right, I don't know whether you're picking up on what I'm saying there, but
Yes, thanks. We get it.
GLaDOS' response when we reach the next chamber is genuinely amusing, emphasizing how much of an idiot Wheatley is yet again.
Alright, he's not even trying to be subtle anymore. Or maybe he still is, in which case, wow, that's kinda sad.
By the way, what's in that test chamber? Well, it's only the ultimate test of timing with excursion funnels and gel. It took me a minute to figure this one out again, which only made finding the solution even more of a gratifying moment. So, how do you do it? Well, as you can see, there's 3 turrets blocking the way to the exit, and since there's repulsion gel, you know exactly what's about to happen. You can then reach the exit by bouncing off the patch of gel that's left behind by gaining portal momentum with the funnel. Again, need I say anything more? I didn't keep my promise about saying concise, but can you blame me? I'm not going to get an excuse to discuss these fantastic puzzles again, so I'm taking the chance to dissect them. Wheatley Laboratories just feels like the perfect culmination of everything the series has done up until now, going all out with pretty much every mechanic that's been introduced since the start. Since the beginning of the game, everything was gradually introduced at a very comprehensive pace, making it easy to learn how all these fantastic puzzle mechanics work, and by the end, the designers just go crazy and find so many creative ways to combine them, just like any good puzzle game does. Like with the first Portal, none of the puzzles ever change if you play the game again, so repeat playthroughs probably need to be spaced apart to make everything feel new and thus be, well, puzzling again. But with how well crafted every aspect of the game is, I really don't mind that. It's a consistently enjoyable experience from beginning to end, and we're still not done yet. There's still a little bit more game to discuss here. Wheatley says we only have 2 more chambers before his big surprise for us, so we've just got to continue on for that. So this next test is pretty simple. There's an event that drops a cube onto the faith plate that can be reached with another plate in the room. So we just step on said plate and...
surprise!
Oh, alright then.
Okay, credit where it's due. For a little idiot built specifically to come up with stupid, unworkable plans, that was a pretty well-laid trap.
You know what, GLaDOS? I agree. By the way, this shot right here, where you can once again observe Aperture's ridiculous size, it looks amazing. I don't know how many more ways I can keep saying that. Wheatley's surprise was pretty obvious from how he talked about it, but he doesn't need us anymore since he found 2 robots built specifically to test. As I said, the co-op mode is actually canon. Anyway, nobody cares, because we're finally at the part where he kills us.
Well, this is the part where he kills us.
Hello, this is the part where I kill you.
We're on a tiny platform surrounded by a million spiked walls that are ready to crush us to bits, and we would be doomed if Wheatley hadn't left a convenient bit of conversion gel right nearby. Nice going, Wheat. Portaling up to the wall above, we can get out of the trap and begin running towards Wheatley's control chamber. And hey, what's that sound?
Okay, look, I've decided I'm not gonna kill you, okay, if you come back.
Oh, just another banger track, nothing much. This final chapter of the game is all focused on set pieces, as Wheatley makes multiple attempts to kill you like he wanted to, and like GLaDOS much earlier during the 4th chapter, resorts to destroying parts of the Aperture facility. All of these set pieces are really exciting. Initially, we have momentum portal jumps, spike panels bashing into the wall, giant moving test chambers with a really funny bit with the defective turrets.
Ha! Death trap! Are they killing you? They are killing you, aren't they? Silently killing you, probably. Ha! Was that your bullet-riddled body flying out of the room? It went... Oh, those were the crap turrets, weren't they?
Stuff like that. Wheatley then puts actual live turrets, which can be knocked out with an excursion funnel, and we have to travel into an opening with it.
Very clever. And foolish. Spinny blade wall. Machiavellian. No. Well, good.
Wow, he really is a moron. He then tries to crush Chell with a spike plate again, but with a well-placed portal, this is no threat to us. We then lay witness to a cool scene in which a tube of repulsion gel collapses onto a catwalk, barely missing Chell and GLaDOS. Is it just me, or does this jump feel just barely possible? It's probably just the pit below making the jump feel way wider than it actually is. Anywho, there's a room of turrets ahead, which need to be covered in repulsion gel, dripping in from another room to proceed. I didn't mention it when talking about covering other things in the gel, but it's funny to watch them bounce around aimlessly. Alright, let's get back on track or this video is never going to end. Even now, Portal 2 simply cannot stop. It's still going full steam. And introduces one last mechanic for good measure. This one's pretty simple. Bombs. I don't think I need to explain. Just place portals so that this glass pipe of conversion gel breaks open, allowing us to portal over to the ledge, and go through the door leading to this huge conveyor belt. Wheatley activates the belt to send Chell into a crusher, and when he fails, he frames it as offering the choice to... Well, in a really neat moment, we blow up the tube of propulsion gel, cover the conveyor with it, and then actually run against the moving belt with the gel to get to the other side. Now that is what I call, in the words of a certain blue rodent, way past cool. Then there's another moment with the gel, where this long stretch of floor has to be covered, allowing us to get into the funnel above and... Look, I know I said I was done talking about the graphics, but this shot right here encapsulates everything so great about them perfectly. It's a shot I remember when thinking back on this game, and for me it represents how far we've come from humble beginnings. Remember, this entire journey started in a measly 70s looking motel room, but since then we went on to explore so much of this building and get a rundown on its history, building up to this stunning view where we, yet again, for the final time, get to gaze upon the immense size of it. Beautiful in more ways than the obvious one. GLaDOS has also gone through change throughout this whole experience, as she says right here.
I've heard voices all my life, but now I hear the voice of a conscience, and it's terrifying. Because for the first time, it's my voice. I'm being serious. I think there's something really wrong with me.
It leads me to believe GLaDOS discovering her origins wasn't just about her finding out she was originally a woman named Carolyn, but also developing a bit of humanity. You know, rather than just being a ruthless killing machine like she was before, she's actually starting to mellow out, and gain at least a shred of, dare I say it, respect and empathy for people. It's almost as if Carolyn is resurfacing, and with her, GLaDOS's humanity is finally doing so too. Interesting character development, to say the least. Once we make it to the other side of this huge pit, there's a shaft to get up, leading into a stockpile of corrupted cores. As soon as I see this exact area, I know that it's business time. It's time to take Wheatley out once and for all. His lair is directly above us, just a short walk away. The ambience here makes it all the more tense, including that orgasmic industrial drone that I've praised more than once in this review. We just have to plug GLaDOS into the elevator, and as we ascend, she gives a short speech that captures how most will probably feel after going through this grand adventure.
Look, even if you think we're still enemies, we're enemies with a common interest. Revenge. You like revenge, right? Everybody likes revenge. Well, let's go get some.
After that, we finally reach Wheatley face to face yet again.
Welcome
To my lair.
Let me just flag something up. According to the control panel light up there, the entire building is going to self-destruct in about 6 minutes. I'm pretty sure it's a problem with the light. I think the light's on the blink, but just in case it isn't, I am actually going to have to kill you, as discussed earlier. So let's call that 3 minutes, and then a minute break, we should leave allegedly 2 minutes to figure out how to shut down whatever's starting all the fires. So anyway, that's the itinerary.
I just love Wheatley's introduction there. It's not too serious and yet still feels fitting for a bad guy introducing his evil lair. Anyway, it's time for the final boss fight. Despite what Wheatley said, where he watched tapes of Chell killing GLaDOS and thus didn't make the same mistakes, there's one critical flaw in his lair's design. He left an exposed pipe of conversion gel in there, and since he shoots bombs, you can blow it up and it creates a bunch of portal surfaces anyway. Well done, really demonstrating your supposed anti-moronic tendencies. I'm joking, of course. This boss fight is rather simple. Wheatley has bomb shields, but they don't cover everything on him, letting you place portals to send bombs onto his blind spot. It's from here where GLaDOS sends in a corrupted core to place on Wheatley, thus corrupting him and potentially triggering another core transfer. What I find interesting is how the first game's final boss revolved around removing cores from a huge robot and destroying them, whereas this one focuses on doing the exact opposite. I'm not the first person to notice this, but I don't care. It's attention to detail that I like. These cores are all voiced by Nolan North, the same actor for the defective turrets, and their personalities are really good. There's the ever-popular Space Core, who just constantly rambles about outer space like a raving madman, the Adventure Core, who tries to sound rugged and, well, adventurous, and finally the Fact Core, who gives us such enlightening facts as,
at some point in their lives, 1 in 6 children will be abducted by the Dutch.
What? Nothing else to say, it's just brilliant. Regardless, once all the cores are placed on Wheatley, the system detects that he's totally corrupt, and once again calls the transfer routine.
Corrupted core, are you ready to start?
What do you think?
Interpreting vague answer as yes.
No.
What happens next must be seen to be believed. It's probably one of the most satisfying video game endings in history. I'm just gonna let it play out in full.
R5! Booby trap the stalemate button! What? Are you still alive? You are joking! You have got to be kidding me! Well, I'm still in control, and I have no idea how to fix this place. Oh, you had to play bloody cat and mouse, didn't you? While people were trying to work. Yeah, well now we're all gonna pay the price, because we're all gonna bloody die. Space! Let go! We're in space! Let go! Let go! I'm still connected! I can pull myself in! I can still fix this!
I already fixed it, and you are not coming back.
Oh no! Change your plans! Hold on to me! Tighter! Grab me! Grab me! Grab me! Grab me!
And I mean this for real this time, can I even add anything new about this? It's such a memorable ending. Does it make logical sense? Does it defy the laws of physics? Is it over the top? Who fucking cares? You get to shoot a portal onto the moon! After Wheatley turned into such a power-hungry madman, I couldn't imagine a more perfect fate for him. Just floating out in space for all eternity. And more to the point, I couldn't imagine this game ending any other way. The way the intense music, mind-blowing visuals, stellar voice acting, all of it comes together and crescendos into this absolutely perfect climactic moment of pure awesomeness. Easily the best ending of any Valve game. I think I've said all there is to say. A sequence where you get to portal onto the literal moon is kinda self-explanatory if you ask me, so why don't we move on? GLaDOS brings us into her chamber yet again, giving what may be the first cordial conversation we've ever had with her.
You know, being Carolyn taught me a valuable lesson. I thought you were my greatest enemy, when all along you were my best friend. The surge of emotion that shot through me when I saved your life taught me an even more valuable lesson, where Carolyn lives in my brain.
Carolyn, deleted.
Goodbye, Carolyn.
Well, both you and I knew this wasn't going to last long. GLaDOS then reflects on a lesson she's learned from all this.
You know, deleting Carolyn just now taught me a valuable lesson. The best solution to a problem is usually the easiest one.
Occam's razor.
And I'll be honest, killing you is hard. You know what my days used to be like? I just tested. Nobody murdered me, or put me in a potato, or fed me to birds. I had a pretty good life. And then you showed up, you dangerous, mute lunatic. So you know what? You win. Just go. It's been fun. Don't come back.
So yeah, no catch, GLaDOS just lets us go. Honestly, there really wasn't anything she could have done after that point. Chell has an iron will to live, so instead of wasting her time trying to kill her, GLaDOS just lets her go. A bit anticlimactic, but honestly, it's fitting. Before we go there, there's one last thing for us in store. Some turrets greet us and take aim, but 1 second later they give us a special gift. They're singing us a goodbye song, and it gets even better from here. That's just beautiful, honestly. Ellen McLean, who also voiced the turrets, is an opera singer on top of being a voice actress. So not only did she provide several iconic voices for some of our favorite characters from this series, she also sings opera. How cool is that? With that in mind, it's no wonder they added this, since it's a perfect send-off for our character Chell. The song itself is emotional, seeing all those turrets at once is just plain cool, and the lyrics that when translated talk about saying goodbye to Chell, it wraps up this series in a nice bow. Upon reaching the surface, Chell walks out to a large open field of wheat, with no forest or anything else in sight. From here, it's unknown what comes of her and if the Resistance successfully fought off the Combine or not, meaning we don't know whether Chell was released into a peaceful planet. What we do know though, well, there's this. Holy shit! Chell is given her companion cube back, tying up every loose end. We're then given another catchy as hell credits theme to end things off. If you wait long enough after that, you'll see Wheatley, who has a moment of introspection as he randomly floats through space.
I wish I could take it all back. I honestly do. I honestly do wish I could take it all back. And not just because I'm stranded in space.
I'm in space.
I know you are, mate. Yeah, we're both in space. Anyway, you know, if I was ever to see her again, do you know what I'd say?
I'm in space.
I'd say, I'm sorry. Sincerely. I am sorry I was bossy and monstrous. And I am genuinely sorry.
I'm in space.
The end.
And on that note, Portal 2 comes to a close as we get a title screen with Wheatley floating through space. Holy shit. Can I just say, I did not expect this segment of the video to become so long. As soon as I started writing about this game, I lost control and couldn't help myself. I know that it may have been disorganized and it might have come off as strange that I went so in-depth, seemingly dissecting and describing every bit of the game there the way I did, but I think it was worth it. Portal 2 is a game that I genuinely, legitimately, unironically believe is a masterpiece. Any nitpicks I brought up, like how the dialogue can take a bit or how the loading screens cause the game to feel less interconnected than other Valve games, are just that, nitpicks. I've thought these things ever since my first time experiencing this game, but it wasn't until recent years where I've been able to articulate them like this. I love everything about it. Its excellent voice acting and story, the stunning visuals from a specially made branch of the Source engine, the amazing environments chock full of that same environmental storytelling that Valve are masters at, the music tracks that enhance every moment they play in, as well as the cues that emphasize the action, all the new gameplay elements introduced which feel so natural I sometimes forget they weren't in the first game, and above all else, how all these elements come together to create such a captivating and memorable experience. It all adds up to something truly special. Portal 2 is far more ambitious than its predecessor in all aspects like story, gameplay, visuals, all that. And I think it not only succeeds with that ambition, but flourishes with it. That one quote I brought up absolutely rings true in my eyes. If Portal was a test bed for this genius concept, then Portal 2 is where it truly matured. It's games like this that just make me proud to be alive, to be able to experience it. I would probably call this my favorite Valve game, and if not, it's definitely right up there with the best of Half-Life, especially Episode 2, and Team Fortress 2. This company just made amazing games during this era, alright? None of that artifact shit, they just made banger after banger. That was a long one, and I'll admit I had no idea it would get this long when I started writing it. I have no idea why I keep doing this to myself, but it was well worth it. Portal is a series that needs no introduction, and at this point hardly even needs a conclusion. Half-Life is Valve's marquee series, and the one they want to demonstrate their new technology with. Team Fortress 2 is, or rather was, their primary competitive multiplayer experience before they effectively abandoned it for CSGO and let it go to shit. Left 4 Dead is their main co-op series focusing on working together with friends. All of these series and games are good to great. To be fair, I haven't played TF2 in a few years, and Left 4 Dead in even longer, so they're not that fresh on my mind. With that said though, even back then, I could definitely tell you that Portal is my favorite Valve series overall. Maybe Half-Life has higher highs in some aspects, but at the end of their day, their gameplay is a fairly standard idea, being an FPS and all. That's not to discredit them or anything, I'm just saying. Portal is such a novel and unique concept that's executed so well, dare I say perfectly, which is ultimately what elevates it for me. Admittedly, it's mostly due to Portal 2, because as you saw, this video was, a little lopsided, let's just say, in how much time I discussed these two games. That's just because talking about that particular game is basically the reason I wanted to do this. But make no mistake, both these games are great and accomplish everything they set out to do. Whether it be the more simple and self-contained Portal, or the more ambitious and exciting Portal 2. I love them all the same. Which, like with Half-Life, brings us to an impasse. Since this is a Valve series, it would never receive another official numbered entry again. Portal 2 would receive DLC like the Perpetual Testing Initiative, which was basically Mario Maker for this series, and there would be the occasional spin-off every now and then, but Portal 3 wouldn't ever be announced or even teased. Valve did experiment with virtual reality for the series, but canned it after it gave playtesters severe motion sickness. Some consider certain fan games the closest thing to a threequel for this series, including Portal Reloaded or Portal Stories Mel, which I should really play at some point. They look hella good. But as far as official Valve stuff goes, nothing. Which makes me ask the question, do I think we need a Portal 3? Of course, I would welcome it with open arms, because there's limitless possibilities to what you could do with this concept. That said, from a story perspective, the series went out on a conclusive note. It wasn't like Half-Life, which was stuck on a never-ending cliffhanger for over a decade. It wrapped up pretty nicely. You could always come up with another story within Aperture, but with Shell having been released from the facility, I'd personally still be content even if we never got an official third entry from Valve, as cool as that would be. If you've watched this entire behemoth of a video from start to finish, thanks. I'm glad I could share the love for Portal. Not just because of the nostalgia I have for it, but because it's a masterpiece of a game series. Other people have probably said this stuff before, but I still think it was worthwhile talking about them because they're damn good. If, for whatever reason, you've never played them yourself, go for it. They're available for $15 USD on Steam as a bundle, meaning you'll save a bit of money over buying them individually for 10 each. I'd say it's worth it to experience them. That's all I really have for today. I promise I'll at least try to make something a little shorter next time, but I have little self-control when it comes to that, so no guarantees. By this point, I'm not totally sure what topic I want to cover in said next video, but I'll think of something. I hope you'll stick around to see what I have in store next. At any rate, thanks for watching, and I will see you then.